Hello everyone, welcome to Midnight Story Channel. I'm here to help you today. I know many of you listen to these stories to help you drift off to sleep, and I'm honored to be part of your journey. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching now? Take a deep breath, get comfortable, and allow yourself to relax. Your story is about to begin. Story 1. The first time I found blood on Sarah's sheets, I told myself it was an unfortunate accident. By the third time, a cold, undeniable certainty settled in. Something was terribly wrong. My roommate was harboring a dark, terrifying secret. And a chilling premonition gnawed at me that uncovering it might cost me everything. I had met Sarah at the bustling start of our sophomore year of college. We were both weary of the chaotic confines of dorm life, eager for the small luxuries of independence that an off-campus apartment could offer. She seemed, at first, perfectly ideal, quiet, studious, with a dry, understated sense of humor that mirrored my own. We quickly found a small, two-bedroom apartment just a stone's throw from campus and settled in together. The initial few months flowed effortlessly, a harmonious rhythm of shared living. We fell into an easy routine, studying side by side in the evenings, occasionally venturing out for a casual coffee or a movie. Sarah was an art major, and I'd often find her engrossed in her sketches late into the night. Her brow furrowed in intense concentration as her vibrant visions began to coalesce on paper. It was approximately 4 months into our living arrangement when I first noticed the unsettling anomaly. I was tackling the laundry, it being my designated week for chores, when my gaze snagged on a small, faint bloodstain marring Sarah's otherwise pristine white sheet. It wasn't inherently unusual. Minor accidents, after all, are a part of life. But when I casually mentioned it to her later, just to inquire about her well-being, her reaction struck me as profoundly odd. She froze for a palpable moment, her eyes widening almost imperceptibly, before she forced a brittle, unnatural laugh. "Oh, that?" she dismissed, waving a hand with a gesture of feigned nonchalance. "I must have nicked myself shaving or something. Thanks for washing it out." I nodded, a faint unease stirring within me, yet something about her response simply didn't sit right. It felt rehearsed, almost as if she had anticipated the question and had a pre-prepared answer. But I brushed it off, pushing the nascent concern aside. After all, it was just a small bloodstain, nothing surely to truly worry about. A few weeks later, it happened again. This time, the stain was noticeably larger, and several ominous crimson splotches were scattered across the sheet. Again, I tentatively brought it up to Sarah, and again, she deflected with a vague, unconvincing explanation about a nosebleed. By the third time, the disturbing evidence was impossible to ignore. The sheets were practically saturated, a horrifying canvas of red, and this time I discovered a bloodied towel crammed almost deliberately at the bottom of the laundry hamper. When I confronted Sarah, her face drained of all color, becoming deathly pale. "It's nothing," she insisted, her voice tight, strained. "I've just been having some health issues. It's under control." But I could clearly see the raw fear flickering in her eyes, the subtle tremor in her hands as she gingerly took the incriminating sheets from me. Something was profoundly, terrifyingly wrong. And Sarah was clearly terrified of anyone discovering its true nature. From that point onward, an unspoken vigilance settled over me. I began paying closer, more meticulous attention to Sarah's behavior. I noticed countless small things I had previously overlooked, dismissed, or simply not seen. How she would sometimes vanish for hours without any plausible explanation. The way she would visibly flinch at unexpected, sudden noises. And then there was the locked box she meticulously kept hidden under her bed, a glimpse of which I had once caught when she opened it, revealing an unsettling glint of cold metal inside. One night, I woke to the muffled, heart-wrenching sound of sobbing, drifting faintly from Sarah's room. I lay there in the suffocating darkness, grappling with indecision, debating whether to check on her, to offer comfort. Just as I resolved to get up, I heard her door creak open. Soft footsteps padded quietly down the hall. Then the front door opened and, with a soft click, closed. I waited a few agonizing minutes, ensuring she was truly gone, then crept cautiously out of my own bed. Sarah's room was empty, her window flung open to reveal the dark, inviting expanse of the fire escape. On her desk, her sketchbook lay open, a silent invitation to a terrifying secret. Curiosity, that relentless, irresistible force, got the better of me, and I flipped through its pages. What I saw made my blood run cold, freezing in my veins. Page after page of profoundly disturbing images, dark, twisted figures with too many limbs, grotesque scenes of unbridled violence and shocking gore, rendered with an exquisite, unsettling detail, and scattered throughout, unnervingly lifelike portraits of a man I had never, ever seen before. In some, he appeared perfectly normal, benign. In others, his face was grotesquely distorted, monstrous, a visage of pure horror. I heard a faint noise outside, a subtle stir that snapped me back to the present, and quickly, silently, I closed the sketchbook, retreating swiftly to the safety of my own room. Through my window, I watched as Sarah, a dark, fleeting shadow, climbed stealthily back up the fire escape. She was dressed entirely in black, and as she slipped back into her room, I caught a terrifying glimpse of something clutched tightly in her hand, something that glinted coldly in the pale moonlight. The next morning, Sarah acted as if absolutely nothing out of the ordinary had transpired. She made coffee, chatted amiably about her classes, even laughed, a light, airy sound, at one of my decidedly lame jokes. But beneath the facade of normalcy, there was a visible tension in her shoulders, a deep, pervasive weariness in her eyes that hadn't been there before, a shadow of unspoken torment. I spent the entire day grappling with the agonizing dilemma of what to do. Should I confront her directly? Should I, with a heavy heart, call the police? But what if I was misinterpreting everything, weaving a dark fantasy from innocuous details? What if there was a perfectly innocent, rational explanation for all of this? That evening, as we sat in the living room, ostensibly studying, I decided to take a chance to plunge into the unsettling truth. Sarah, I began, attempting to keep my voice as casual, as unthreatening as possible. Is everything okay? You've seemed, I don't know, on edge lately, you know? She stiffened immediately, her pencil pausing mid-sketch, a frozen tableau of tension. Everything's fine, she insisted, her voice tight, strained. Just stressed about midterms, you know? I took a deep, fortifying breath, preparing for the leap into the unknown. It's just the blood on your sheets, I pressed, the words tumbling out. Your disappearances. And last night. I heard you leave. Sarah's head snapped up, her eyes wide with a sudden, raw panic. You don't understand, she whispered, her voice barely audible. A fragile thread. You can't know. It's not safe. What's not safe? I demanded, my own voice gaining strength, resolve. Sarah, whatever's going on, I want to help. You can trust me. For a fleeting moment, a fragile hope flickered within me that she might finally open up, reveal the terrifying truth. I saw the profound internal struggle play out on her pale face. The desperate desire to unburden herself, to share the crushing weight of her secret, warring fiercely with an overwhelming, paralyzing fear. But then her expression hardened, a mask of grim determination replacing the vulnerability. I need some air, she stated abruptly, standing up with a sudden, decisive movement. Don't wait up. Before I could utter another word, she was gone, the door slamming shut behind her with a desolate finality. I sat there for a long, agonizing time, staring at the closed door, a wooden barrier between me and a terrifying truth. A part of me, a desperate, yearning part, wanted to follow her, to demand answers, to pull the truth from her. But another part, a part one was deeply ashamed of, was consumed by fear of what those answers might truly be. Around midnight, I heard her return. I feigned sleep, my breathing even and slow, as she moved cautiously around the apartment. I heard the faint sound of water running in the bathroom, then the soft click of her bedroom door closing. The next morning, Sarah was gone before I woke up. She had left a note on the kitchen counter, its mundane words a stark contrast to the previous night's terror. Gone to visit family for a few days. See you next week. I stood there, reading and rereading the note, its normalcy almost surreal, as if the suffocating tension of the past few weeks, the horrifying blood, the unsettling secrets, had all been a mere figment of my imagination, a manufactured nightmare. But I knew better, and I knew with a chilling certainty that I couldn't simply let this go. While Sarah was away, I embarked on a desperate, clandestine investigation, digging for answers. I searched her name online, scoured what little social media presence she had. I found nothing unusual, nothing to explain the terrifying anomalies. Sarah Parker, 20 years old, art student, no criminal record, no strange affiliations. It was only when I began delving into her family history that things took an unsettling turn, becoming profoundly strange. I couldn't find any official record of them. No parents listed on her college application. No siblings mentioned on Facebook. It was as if Sarah, this seemingly normal girl, had simply sprung into existence, fully formed at the tender age of 18. Acting on a desperate hunch, a chilling intuition, I tried searching for the man from her disturbing sketches. I had no name, no concrete information, but I had a face etched into my memory. After hours of relentless scrolling through countless image searches, I found him. Dr. Marcus Heller, professor of anthropology at a university across the country, specialized in occult practices and fringe religious movements. Disappeared 3 years ago under mysterious circumstances. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum, as I devoured the article detailing his disappearance. Colleagues described him as brilliant, yes, but deeply unstable. Consumed by an obsessive quest to prove the existence of what he cryptically termed hidden realities. The police had investigated, but the trail had long since gone cold, a frustrating dead end. And now, impossibly, horrifyingly, Sarah was intimately connected to him. I was still staring at the damning article, the words blurring before my eyes, when I heard the distinct sound of the front door opening. Sarah was back, a day earlier than she had stated in her casual note. I quickly slammed my laptop shut, the screen going black, desperately attempting to compose myself, to appear calm and collected. But when Sarah walked into the living room, one look at her pale, drawn face told me with chilling certainty that she already knew. "You've been looking into me," she stated, her voice devoid of inflection. A flat, undeniable statement rather than a question. I nodded, unable to trust myself to speak, my throat tight with fear. Sarah sighed, a deep, weary sound, and sank into the armchair across from me. She looked utterly exhausted, defeated, a shadow of her former self. "I hoped it wouldn't come to this," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper. "I really liked living with you, you know? It felt normal." "Sarah," I said, finally finding my voice, though it was little more than a hoarse whisper. "What's going on? Who are you, really?" She was quiet for a long, agonizing moment, her gaze fixed on her clasped hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady, calm, yet I could discern the subtle, terrifying undercurrent of deep-seated fear. "My real name is Emily Heller," she stated, her words slow, deliberate. "Marcus Heller was my father." An icy chill ran down my spine, a shiver of profound dread. "Was Sarah?" Emily nodded, confirming my unspoken horror. "He's dead. I killed him." The words hung in the air between us, heavy and irrevocable, a damning pronouncement. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to run, to flee, to call the police, to desperately cling to the hope that I would simply wake up from this nightmarish reality. But I remained rooted to the spot, paralyzed, waiting for her to continue to unravel the terrifying truth. My father wasn't who everyone thought he was, she went on, her voice gaining a strange, almost detached quality. His research, his obsession with the occult, it wasn't merely academic. He found something. Something real. And it changed him. She then wove a story that seemed utterly impossible, a tale ripped from the darkest realms of fiction. Ancient rituals and terrifying entities from beyond our known reality. How her father, in his insatiable quest for forbidden knowledge, had made contact with something he should never have touched. How it had possessed him, twisted him, transforming him into something monstrous, something profoundly inhuman. The blood, I whispered, the stained sheets, the terrifying disappearances, the glint of metal all crashing back into my mind with horrifying clarity. The nights you disappeared? Emily nodded, her eyes distant, haunted. It's still out there. The thing that took my father. It wants to finish what it started. I'm the only one who can stop it. Her voice dropped, becoming even more raw, revealing a profound weariness. But every time I fight it, I come back bloodied. I sat there, my mind struggling desperately to process everything she was revealing. A deluge of impossible, terrifying truths. A stubborn part of me, a small voice of self-preservation, wanted to dismiss it all as the ravings of a deeply disturbed mind. But I had witnessed the raw, unadulterated fear in her eyes. The unwavering conviction in her voice, and deep down, a primal certainty. I knew she was speaking the horrifying truth. What happens now? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, dreading the answer. Emily stood up, moving slowly to the window. Outside, the sun was beginning its descent, casting long, encroaching shadows across the room. The world outside mirroring the encroaching darkness within. Now, she said, turning back to me, her eyes filled with a complex mixture of fragile hope and profound resignation. You have a choice. You can walk away from this. Move out. Forget everything I've told you. Live a normal life. Her gaze held mine, intense, unwavering. Or, she continued, you can help me, but I warn you, if you choose this path, there's no going back. Your life will never be normal again. I looked at her, this girl I thought I knew so intimately, who had turned out to be so much more than I could have ever possibly imagined. I thought about the normal life I could have had, the comforting, oblivious safety of ignorance. And then I thought about the terrifying darkness she faced, the solitary battles she fought, utterly alone. In that pivotal moment, my choice solidified, clear and undeniable. Tell me everything. I said, my voice strong, resolute, surprising even myself. Tell me how I can help. Emily's shoulders sagged, a visible release of immense tension. And for the very first time in what felt like weeks, a genuine, unburdened smile finally graced her face. As the last vestiges of daylight faded from the sky, she began to speak, and I listened intently, knowing, with a profound certainty, that my life had just irrevocably changed forever. The blood on the sheets, it had been merely the beginning. Now I was stepping, willingly, into a shadowed world of chilling secrets and ancient evils, of lurking malevolence and the brave, desperate few who stood as a fragile barrier against them. And somehow, deep within my soul, I knew that this dangerous, terrifying path, not the safe, ordinary life I had always imagined, was precisely where I was meant to be. Story 2. The moment I stepped through that crumbling doorway, a cold, undeniable dread washed over me. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to my core, I'd made a terrible, irredeemable mistake. The air inside was thick with dust and the cloying sweetness of decay. But beneath that lingered something else. A scent that spoke of secrets long buried and horrors best left undisturbed. I should have turned back then, should have heeded the silent warnings whispered by the wind through the broken, vacant windows. But curiosity, that insatiable, fatal flaw, has always been my weakness, and it was about to lead me directly into a nightmare from which I might never truly wake. I'd always been morbidly fascinated by urban legends. Those unsettling narratives that skirt the edges of believability and send a delicious shiver down your spine. So, when I overheard whispers about the old Ashwood Manor on the desolate outskirts of town, I simply couldn't resist the pull to investigate. The stories varied, as they often do with such tales, shifting and warping with each retelling. Some claimed the house was irrevocably haunted by the tormented spirits of the Ashwood family, who had all met a mysterious, gruesome end one bitter winter night in the 1950s. Others whispered of it being a malevolent portal to another, darker dimension, asserting that anyone who dared to enter never quite emerged the same, if they emerged at all. Most locals, gripped by a palpable fear, meticulously avoided the place, crossing themselves with a hasty prayer when their cars drove past and hurrying their children along if they lingered too long, staring at its dilapidated, skeletal facade. But to me, it was an irresistible, forbidden siren song. I chose a gloomy Tuesday afternoon for my ill-fated expedition. The sky above was a canvas of bruised, overcast gray, threatening an imminent downpour, a fitting backdrop for the morbid task at hand. I parked my car a discreet distance down the forgotten road, not wanting to draw any undue attention to myself, and approached the manor on foot. The house loomed before me, a decaying, skeletal giant of peeling paint and rotting wood, its grandeur long since surrendered to entropy. The front gate, a rusted relic, hung askew on its protesting hinges, creaking ominously as I pushed it open, a mournful welcome. Weeds thick and rampant choked the once manicured lawn, a testament to years of neglect. And the porch steps groaned under my cautious weight, sounding like a dying beast. I hesitated at the front door, my hand hovering, trembling slightly, over the tarnished brass knob. This was my final chance to retreat, to turn back, to simply dismiss this foolishness as a fleeting moment of misguided bravery and return to the comforting, mundane safety of the known world. But I didn't. I turned the knob, surprised to find it unlocked, and stepped inside. The interior was a desolate study in advanced decay. Wallpaper, once vibrant, now peeled in long, serpentine strips, revealing the raw, bare bones of the house beneath. Furniture lay scattered and broken, as if a great, destructive storm had violently torn through the place, leaving only shattered remnants. Dust motes, thick and dancing, swirled lazily in the weak, ethereal light filtering through grime-caked windows, lending the air a hazy, dreamlike, almost surreal quality. I moved deeper into the house, my footsteps echoing with an unnerving hollowness in the vast, empty rooms. In what must have once been the grand living room, a magnificent fireplace stood, a silent, somber sentinel, its mantel now forlornly adorned with a few faded, sepia-toned photographs. I picked one up, my thumb instinctively wiping away years of accumulated grime and dust. A family smiled back at me from the faded image. A mother, a father, 2 children. The Ashwoods, I presumed. They looked happy, undeniably normal, frozen in a moment of bygone innocence. What unspeakable horror had befallen them? As I carefully set the photo back down, a faint noise from upstairs made me freeze, every muscle in my body locking into place. It was barely audible. A subtle sound, yet in the oppressive stillness of the house, it reverberated like a gunshot, a distinct creak of floorboards as if someone or something was slowly moving around up there. My heart began to pound, a frantic drum against my ribs. I desperately tried to rationalize it, to tell myself it was just the old house settling. The ancient wood responding to imperceptible changes in temperature. But another part of me, a more primal, insistent part, screamed a terrifying truth. I was not alone. I should have fled then. Any sane, rational person would have. But that damned curiosity of mine, that relentless, irresistible siren, won out again. I found myself drawn, almost magnetically, towards the stairs, each ascending step an eternity as the old, protesting wood groaned mournfully beneath my weight. The upper floor was, if possible, in an even worse state of disrepair than the ground level. Here, The cloying smell of decay was even stronger, mingled with something else, a coppery tang, faint yet unsettling, that tickled the back of my throat, a metallic whisper of blood. I moved slowly down the hallway, peering tentatively into each room as I passed. A child's bedroom, frozen in time, dusty toys still scattered tragically across the floor. A poignant tableau of a life abruptly ended. A bathroom, its mirror cracked and clouded, reflecting only distorted nightmares. A master bedroom, the bed still meticulously made, as if patiently awaiting its owner's return. And then I reached the last door. Unlike all the others, this one was firmly closed, a silent, ominous barrier. As I stood before it, my heart hammering. I could have sworn I heard something from the other side, a faint whisper, perhaps, or the soft, almost imperceptible rustle of movement. My hand shook uncontrollably as I reached for the cold doorknob, every fiber of my being screaming at me to run, to flee, to escape this house and never, ever look back. But I couldn't stop now. The relentless pull of the unknown was too strong. I had to know. The door swung open with a mournful creak that seemed to echo through the entire decaying house, a lament for what lay beyond. At first, my mind struggled, unable to make sense of the horrifying tableau unfolding before me. The room beyond was plunged into profound darkness, its windows crudely boarded up, sealing it off from the outside world. But as my eyes slowly adjusted to the oppressive gloom, I began to discern shapes, horrifying, unimaginable forms in the blackness. Shelves lined the walls, crammed with countless jars of various sizes. And in those jars, I stumbled backward, a guttural sound of revulsion catching in my throat, while rising bitter and acidic. Human remains, pieces of people, preserved in murky, viscous fluid, hands contorted and skeletal, feet gnarled and grotesque, eyes disembodied and chilling. That seemed to stare accusingly at me through the clouded glass, silent witnesses to unspeakable horrors. But that wasn't even the worst of it. In the horrifying center of the room, a large table stood, and on that table lay something that had once, undeniably, been human. It was twisted, horribly changed, its limbs elongated and grotesque, its skin a sickly, unnatural gray. Its chest rose and fell with shallow, rattling breaths. It was alive. I must have made a sound, a gasp, a choked whimper, I'm not entirely sure. But suddenly, its entirely black eyes, like bottomless, abyssal pits, snapped open, and they fixed directly, terrifyingly on me. I ran. I ran like I had never run before, a blind, panicked dash, stumbling down the creaking stairs, through the decaying, echoing rooms, out into the fading, bruised afternoon light. I didn't stop until my lungs burned, a raw, excruciating agony, and my heart felt like it might violently explode from my chest. As I fumbled desperately with my car keys, my hands shaking uncontrollably, I risked a fleeting, terrified glance back at the house. There, framed in an upstairs window, I saw a figure. Not the twisted, monstrous thing from the room, but a man. He looked ordinary enough, middle-aged, with thinning, graying hair. He smiled, and then he waved, as if we were nothing more than friendly neighbors exchanging polite greetings across a shared fence. I drove away, my tires squealing in protest on the asphalt, leaving a trail of terror behind me. I didn't slow down, not until I was safely back in town, surrounded by the comforting, mundane signs of normal life. People walking their dogs, children playing, the familiar, reassuring glow of streetlights flickering on as dusk finally fell. That night, sleep was an impossible concept. Every time I closed my eyes, the horrifying images flashed behind them. Those jars, the unspeakable thing on the table, the man waving with that unnerving smile from the window. I tried desperately to convince myself it wasn't real, that I'd imagined it all, a vivid product of an overactive imagination fueled by too many urban legends. But deep down, a chilling, undeniable certainty resonated within me. What I'd witnessed in that house was horrifyingly real, and somehow I knew with a sinking dread that it wasn't over. The next day, driven by a desperate need for answers, I went to the local library, determined to unearth more about the Ashwood Manor and its grim history. The librarian, an elderly woman named Margaret, grew visibly pale when I even uttered its name. "Why do you want to know about that place?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, laced with a tremor of fear. I hesitated, then, compelled by the sheer weight of what I had seen, decided to confess the terrifying truth. As I recounted my experience, her eyes grew wider and wider, reflecting a profound horror. When I finished, she sat back in her chair, shaking her head slowly. A deep sorrow etched on her face. "You shouldn't have gone there," she said, her voice a hushed, solemn warning. "No one should ever go there." She then told me a story, a chilling, whispered tale that had been passed down through generations in the small, insular town. The Ashwoods, she revealed, had not been what they seemed. They were practitioners of dark, forbidden arts, relentless seekers of occult knowledge. They had delved into realms best left unexplored, she whispered, and in doing so had unleashed something unspeakable, something truly terrible. "The night they died," Margaret said, her voice trembling, "the whole town could hear the screams. When the police finally broke down the door," she continued, "they found, well, they never spoke about what they found. But those who went in were never the same afterwards." I thought of the jars, of the grotesque thing on the table, and a deep shudder ran through me. "But I saw someone there," I said, a desperate attempt to grasp at some shred of logic. "A man waving from the window." Margaret's face went even paler, a deathly white. "That's impossible," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "No one has lived in that house for 60 years. As I left the library, my mind was reeling, a chaotic storm of terrifying possibilities. What had I truly stumbled into? What unspeakable horrors were truly transpiring in that house, defying time and logic? Over the next few days, I desperately tried to push it all from my mind. I went to work, met friends for drinks, attempted all the mundane, normal things that comprise a typical life. But I couldn't shake the insidious feeling that something profound had changed within me. Irrevocably, I felt perpetually watched, a suffocating presence. I'd catch fleeting glimpses of movement out of the corner of my eye, only to turn and find nothing there. And then the dreams began. Terrible, vivid nightmares of that horrifying room, of jars filled with writhing, grotesque things that had once been human, of the smiling man from the window approaching me with a gleaming knife. I'd wake up screaming, drenched in cold sweat, the sickly, coppery smell from the house seeming to linger, a phantom stench in my nostrils. A week after my ill-fated visit to the Ashwood Manor, I came home to find a package resting ominously on my doorstep. There was no return address, no postmark, just my name meticulously written in an elegant, old-fashioned script. A chillingly personal touch. With trembling hands, I opened it. Inside was a single jar, identical to the ones I'd seen in that horrific room and floating in the cloudy, viscous liquid within was a human eye, its iris a striking, unnerving blue. Taped to the jar was a terse, chilling note. "You saw. Now you're part of it. We'll be seeing you soon." I don't know what to do. I can't go to the police. Who would possibly believe such a monstrous tale? I can't leave town, somehow, I know with a bone-deep certainty. They would find me wherever I went, no matter how far. All I can do is wait, and wonder when they will come for me. So, if you're reading this, heed my desperate warning. Stay far away from the Ashwood Manor. Do not let curiosity, that fatal, insidious flaw, get the better of you. Because once you step inside, once you glimpse what truly lurks in the unfathomable shadows of that place, you can never truly leave. And remember, if you ever find a package on your doorstep with no return address, no identifying mark, don't open it. Run. Run as far and as fast as you possibly can. Because by then, it might already be too late. Story 3. The headlights in my rearview mirror were relentless. Unblinking gaze that had shadowed me for what felt like an eternity, miles down this deserted highway. At first, I dismissed it. A common enough occurrence, just another late-night traveler making their way across the vast expanse. But as the minutes bled into an hour, then two, and the car behind me mirrored my every subtle move, a chilling, undeniable realization solidified. This was no random coincidence. Someone was deliberately following me, and out here, in the profound isolation of the middle of nowhere, I was utterly, terrifyingly alone. It had begun as a perfectly ordinary drive home from a weekend spent with my parents. I'd lingered longer than intended, the warm goodbyes and the tempting just one more cup of coffee stretching comfortably into the late evening. By the time I finally hit the open road, the sun had already dipped below the horizon, abandoning me to navigate the long, winding stretch of highway that cut through miles of desolate farmland and dense, encroaching patches of forest. I'd always found a strange, quiet peace in driving at night, the world narrowing down to the intimate pool of light cast by my headlights and the mesmerizing, hypnotic rhythm of the white lines on the road. But tonight, that cherished peace was shattered, irrevocably fractured by the persistent, unnerving presence behind me. I first became acutely aware of the car about an hour into my journey. It was nothing remarkable, just a dark sedan, its nondescript form blending seamlessly with the oppressive night. But as I drove on, a growing unease began to stir within me. It maintained a consistent, almost unnatural distance, never passing even when I subtly slowed my pace, never falling back when I intentionally increased my speed. At first, I tried to rationalize it away to quell the nascent fear. I told myself I was being paranoid, that it was probably just someone heading in the same general direction, perhaps another weary family visitor making their way home. But as the minutes stretched into an hour, then two, the knot of dread in my stomach tightened, growing cold and hard. I attempted all the usual, futile tricks. I deliberately varied my speed, slowing to a crawl, hoping they would simply pass, then accelerating well over the speed limit. The car, a silent, menacing shadow, matched my pace with unnerving precision. I activated my turn signal, feigning an exit, then at the very last second, swerved back onto the main highway. The car behind me, a perfectly synchronized echo, did the exact same thing. By now, my heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic, thunderous drum. This was far from normal behavior. Whoever was behind me was unequivocally, terrifyingly following me. And out here, with no other cars in sight, no distant lights, and the next town a terrifying number of miles away, I felt a chilling, profound vulnerability. I fumbled for my cell phone, my fingers clumsy with growing panic, desperately hoping to summon help. But, of course, there was no signal. Just my luck to be marooned in one of the few dwindling dead zones left in the entire country. As I grappled frantically with what desperate action to take next, the car behind me abruptly surged forward. In mere seconds, it was right on my bumper, so frighteningly close I couldn't even discern its headlights in my rearview mirror anymore. My hands clenched the steering wheel, my knuckles stark white against the dark plastic, a silent testament to my escalating fear. Then, without any warning, the car swerved sharply into the left lane and pulled up directly alongside me, a dark, menacing parallel. I kept my eyes fixed firmly on the road ahead, too utterly terrified to risk even a fleeting glance to my left. But I could feel it, a palpable weight. The other driver's intense, unwavering gaze, boring into the side of my head, a silent, predatory scrutiny. Slowly, agonizingly against every screaming instinct within me, I turned my head to look. The other car's windows were tinted, a deep, impenetrable black, too dark to discern anything inside to even catch a glimpse of the driver's face. But as I watched, transfixed by a horrifying fascination, the driver's window began, with a slow, deliberate hum, to roll down. I snapped my eyes back to the road, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. What did they want? Were they going to try to run me off the road, to force me into a ditch? My mind raced, conjuring up a dizzying array of worst-case scenarios, each more terrifying and grotesque than the last. A horn blared, a long, piercing blast that shattered the night and made me jump violently in my seat. The other car was signaling for me to pull over. Fat chance of that happening, I thought. A desperate defiance flaring within me. If anything, I pressed harder on the accelerator, urging my car to gain more speed, to somehow outrun this nightmare. The other driver, an unnerving shadow, matched my speed, staying locked in position right beside me. Then a voice carried faintly on the wind rushing between our two speeding vehicles cut through the night. Pull over. You need to pull over, now. It was a man's voice, deep and insistent, a command. I shook my head, more to myself than to him, a desperate refusal. There was absolutely no way I was stopping out here, in the middle of nowhere, with this lunatic. The man's voice came again, this time more urgent, a sharper edge of desperation in his tone. Your back tire. It's about to blow. Pull over. My back tire? I risked a fleeting glance at my side mirror, but in the dim, distorted reflection, I couldn't discern anything overtly wrong. This had to be a trick, right? Some devious ploy to coerce me into stopping so he could, what? Rob me? Or something far, far worse? But an insidious seed of doubt had been planted, a tiny, unsettling whisper of logic amidst the overwhelming panic. What if he was telling the terrifying truth? What if my tire truly was about to blow out at these speeds, on this desolate, empty road? That could be deadly. I had a split second to make an agonizing decision. Trust this complete stranger who had been relentlessly following me for hours, or risk a potentially fatal accident. A violent crash in the pitch black. In that primal moment, the powerful instinct for survival utterly eclipsed caution. I eased my foot off the gas pedal and carefully steered my car towards the shoulder. My heart pounding so violently I could feel its frantic rhythm throbbing in my throat. The other car followed suit, pulling up directly behind me the instant I came to a stop. I slammed my car into park and, with trembling hands, grabbed my phone again, ready to dial 911 the very second I detected any hint of a signal. I watched in my mirrors as the driver's door of the other car slowly opened. A man stepped out. In the dim, ambient light from our cars, I could discern his features, middle-aged, with kind, weathered graying hair, and a surprisingly gentle face that seemed utterly at odds with the sheer terror he had just inflicted upon me. He approached my car slowly, his hands held up in a non-threatening, open gesture. A silent plea for understanding. I cracked my window just enough to catch his words. I'm so sorry to frighten you, he said, his voice genuinely apologetic, laced with regret. But your back right tire is shredding. Another few miles, and it would have blown out completely. I stared at him, my mind struggling desperately to process this sudden, bewildering turn of events. What? How do you know that? He gestured towards my car, a slight incline of his head. I noticed it about an hour ago. There's a strip of rubber flapping in the dark. You probably couldn't see it in your mirrors. I tried to catch up to you, to let you know, but you kept speeding up. I was afraid you'd crash before I could warn you. My lingering suspicion wrestled fiercely with an overwhelming wave of profound relief. Could this truly be true? Had I really horribly misjudged the situation so profoundly? Look for yourself, he offered, stepping back from the car, his voice gentle. But be careful. The tire might go at any moment. Wearily, I opened my door and stepped out. Sure enough, when I walked around to the back of my car, I saw it. A long strip of black rubber was peeling away from my right rear tire, flapping loosely, a grotesque, dangerous streamer. The man had been right. If I'd kept driving, even for a few more minutes, it would have blown out entirely. The terrifying realization of how agonizingly close I'd come to a serious, potentially fatal accident made my knees weak. Buckling beneath me, I leaned heavily against my car, suddenly lightheaded, the adrenaline finally beginning its slow, draining descent. Are you okay? The man asked, his voice laced with genuine concern. I nodded, unable to trust myself to speak just yet. Now that the initial raw adrenaline was wearing off, I felt profoundly shaky, a little nauseous. I'm Tom. By the way, he said, offering a small, reassuring smile. I'm sorry again for scaring you. I know how it must have looked, me following you like that. I should have found a better way to get your attention. I managed to introduce myself, my voice still a bit dazed. Thank you, I added, the words feeling utterly inadequate. You might have saved my life. Tom nodded, a modest incline of his head. Happy to help. Now let's see about getting that tire changed, shall we? You've got a spare, I hope? For the next half an hour, Tom, a quiet, reassuring presence, helped me expertly change my tire. As we worked in the dim glow of the headlights, he recounted stories from his life as a long-haul trucker, how he'd witnessed countless, horrific accidents caused by blown tires. That's why I always keep an eye out for other drivers. He explained, his voice low and steady. Especially at night. It's dangerous out here. By the time we finished, my lingering fear had been utterly replaced by a profound sense of gratitude. And more than a little embarrassment at how utterly I'd misjudged the entire situation. Tom gently refused my repeated offers of payment, waving them off with a kind, unassuming smile. Just pay it forward, he said, his eyes twinkling in the dim light. Keep an eye out for others on the road. We've all got to look out for each other out here. As I watched Tom drive away, his truck disappearing into the inky blackness from which he had emerged, I was struck by the profound, almost dizzying speed with which things can shift and transform. In the span of a few short hours, I journeyed from paralyzing terror to overwhelming relief, from ingrained suspicion to profound gratitude. I had been so quick, so tragically eager, to assume the absolute worst, to perceive threats lurking in every shadow. But I also thought about Tom, a quiet, unassuming beacon of kindness, and how, even in this vast, indifferent world, there are still genuinely good people out there, individuals willing to go above and beyond to extend a helping hand to a complete stranger. The remainder of my drive home was uneventful, a quiet, contemplative journey, but it provided ample, much-needed time for profound reflection. I considered deeply how fear, that insidious primal emotion, can so profoundly distort our perceptions, warping reality, making it agonizingly easy to perceive threats in every subtle shadow. But I also held onto the image of Tom, a quiet testament to the enduring presence of kindness, and how there are still individuals who embody the very best of humanity, willing to step out of their way to offer aid, even when that aid might be profoundly misunderstood. As I finally pulled into my driveway, utterly exhausted but miraculously safe, I made a solemn promise to myself. I would strive always to be more like Tom, to look out for others, to offer help, even when the gesture might be misconstrued, misinterpreted, or met with suspicion. Because sometimes, the true danger isn't the mysterious, menacing stranger lurking behind you on a dark, desolate road. Sometimes the true danger lies within, in allowing fear to close our hearts, to blind us to the profound, unexpected possibility of human kindness. The next time I saw headlights loom large in my rearview mirror on a lonely, desolate stretch of road, I didn't feel the familiar surge of paralyzing fear. Instead, a faint, knowing smile touched my lips, remembering Tom and the invaluable lesson he had imparted to me about trust, about unexpected kindness, and about the surprising, often profound, ways we can and must look out for each other in this unpredictable, often terrifying journey we call life. Story 4. The girl's eyes were wide, dilated pools of raw terror, her words spilling out in a frantic, almost unintelligible whisper. Please, you have to help me. They're coming. In that electrifying moment, as we stood in the flickering, anemic light of the deserted rest stop, I knew, with a chilling certainty, that my quiet night drive had just veered sharply into a nightmare far beyond anything I could have ever possibly imagined. It was just past midnight, and I'd been behind the wheel for what felt like an eternity, hours bleeding into each other on the endless road. As a long-haul trucker, I was intimately accustomed to these solitary, Ceaseless nights, the hypnotic rhythm of the white lines on the highway stretching out before me, an endless, shimmering ribbon. But something about this particular night felt profoundly different. Unsettlingly off. The air was heavy, thick with an unseen charge, a strange energy I couldn't quite explain, a premonition of lurking danger. I'd pulled into this rest stop more out of ingrained habit than any real necessity. It was one of those small, isolated places you find dotted along the forgotten stretches of highway, just a few dim, sputtering lights, a couple of archaic vending machines, and a stark block of weathered, graffiti-scarred restrooms. As I finally stepped out of my monstrous truck, stretching my cramped legs, I was immediately struck by the profound, unnatural quiet. There were no other vehicles. No distant hum of passing traffic. Just the soft, insistent buzz of unseen insects and the mournful whisper of wind rustling through the nearby trees. That's when I saw her. A girl. She couldn't have been more than 15 or 16, her slender frame emerging like a specter from the deep shadows near the restrooms. Her clothes were dirty and torn, hanging loosely on her. And her hair was a tangled, matted mess, a wild bird's nest. But it was her eyes that truly seized my attention, pinning me in place, wide, frantic, dilated with a raw, unadulterated terror that sent a cold wave through my very blood. She approached me with excruciating caution, like a wounded, cornered animal, profoundly unsure whether to trust or to flee. "Please," she repeated, her voice barely audible, a fragile whisper carried on the night air. "You have to help me. I've been held. I escaped, but they'll be looking for me." My mind raced, struggling desperately to process the impossible words tumbling from her lips. Held? Escaped? Who were they? A stubborn, skeptical part of me, clinging to the mundane, wanted to believe this was some elaborate, cruel prank or a profound misunderstanding. But the raw, unvarnished fear in her eyes, the uncontrollable trembling of her hands, this was undeniably real. "Okay," I said, striving to keep my voice calm, steady, and reassuring despite the burgeoning panic within me. "It's all right. You're safe now. Let's get you in my truck and we'll call the police." She nodded, a fragile tendril of relief momentarily flooding her pale face. But as we turned, taking a tentative step towards the comforting silhouette of my truck, headlights, blinding and sudden, sliced through the oppressive darkness. A dark van, its engine a low, menacing growl in the quiet night, pulled into the rest stop. The girl froze, her body tensing, coiling like a spring, every muscle rigid with renewed terror. "It's them," she whispered, the words etched with pure, agonizing fear. I didn't stop to think, didn't allow myself the luxury of hesitation. Pure instinct took over. I grabbed her hand, my fingers closing tightly around hers, and we ran, a desperate, scrambling dash towards the distant safety of my truck. I could hear them now, car doors slamming shut behind us, the crunch of heavy footsteps on the loose gravel, growing louder, more insistent. We reached my rig, and I all but lifted the girl, propelling her into the passenger seat before scrambling in myself, my heart hammering against my ribs. As I turned the key in the ignition, I got my first clear, horrifying look at our pursuers. 3 men were approaching, their faces hard, grim masks, their eyes glinting with a coldness that sent fresh shivers down my spine. The one in front, a tall, imposing man with graying hair, called out, his voice surprisingly calm, almost friendly, and unnerving dissonance. "There's been a misunderstanding," he said, his tone smooth, practiced. "That's my daughter. She's not well, you see. Ran away from the hospital. We've been looking everywhere for her." I glanced quickly at the girl beside me. She was shaking her head frantically, a silent, desperate plea, hot tears streaming down her dirty face. "He's lying," she choked out, her voice raw with terror. "Please, don't let them take me." In that electrifying moment, a pivotal choice presented itself. Believe this man with his calm demeanor and utterly plausible, rehearsed story, or trust my gut, the visceral instinct screaming at me and the raw terror radiating from the fragile girl beside me. The decision took less than a heartbeat. I slammed the truck into gear, the powerful engine roaring to life, and peeled out of the rest stop, tires screeching in protest on the asphalt, leaving a cloud of dust and the menacing figures behind. In my side mirror, I saw the men, momentarily stunned, running back to their dark van. Within moments, they were directly behind us, their headlights blazing, two furious eyes burning in the darkness. "Hold on!" I yelled to the girl, whose name I would soon learn was Emily, as I pushed the accelerator to the floor, forcing my rig to its absolute limits. My truck wasn't built for speed, a heavy, lumbering beast, but I knew these roads, every curve, every dip, every treacherous stretch. I had to hope that knowledge would be enough. For the next terrifying hour, we played a desperate, high-stakes game of cat and mouse along the dark, winding highway. The van, a relentless, pursuing demon, stayed disturbingly close behind us, no matter how I tried to lose them, how aggressively I swerved and accelerated. Emily, her voice often broken by ragged sobs, filled me in on bits and pieces of her horrifying story. She'd been taken almost 2 years ago, snatched off the street in broad daylight, a life abruptly stolen. There were others, she whispered. Other girls and boys held captive in a compound somewhere deep in the mountains. She'd managed to escape during a transfer, slipping away at a gas station and hiding in the woods until, by some miracle, she stumbled upon this very rest stop. As she spoke, my horror grew, a chilling realization settling in. This wasn't just a random kidnapping. This was something far larger, far more organized, the kind of unspeakable horror you hear whispers about in hushed tones, but desperately hope is never truly real. We were rapidly approaching a small, sleeping town when I saw the van, a dark, menacing specter, pull relentlessly alongside us. The passenger window, with a slow, deliberate hum, rolled down, and I saw it, the cold, unforgiving barrel of a gun pointing directly at us, a dark, terrifying eye. "Pull over now," the man from earlier, his friendly demeanor now entirely stripped away, shouted, his voice a raw, brutal command. "Or we start shooting." Emily whimpered beside me, a small, piteous sound curling into a tight ball in her seat, a fragile bundle of fear. I knew our odds weren't good. My truck, a sturdy beast, could absorb a beating, but all it would take was one lucky shot, one precisely aimed bullet to blow out a tire, and we would be utterly, irrevocably done. That's when I saw it. A police station. Just ahead on the right, a small, unassuming building. It was a small-town outfit, probably closed and deserted this time of night, but it was our best, our only shot. "Hold on tight," I yelled to Emily, then without a millisecond of warning, I yanked the wheel hard to the right, a sharp, violent swerve. My massive truck plowed through the chain-link fence surrounding the police station's small parking lot as if it were made of delicate paper, a thunderous crash of tearing metal and splintering posts. The van, caught completely off guard by my sudden, desperate maneuver, screeched past us, its tires burning rubber before slamming on its brakes, momentarily disoriented. I didn't stop. Didn't even pause until we were directly up against the solid, reassuring front doors of the station. The thunderous crash had, miraculously, set off alarms, and I could already hear the faint, but unmistakable wail of sirens in the distance, growing steadily louder, a symphony of salvation. "Come on," I yelled to Emily, my voice raw with exertion and adrenaline, helping her down from the high cab, her small body trembling violently. "We're going to be okay now." The men from the van were out of their vehicle now, looking momentarily unsure, their previous menace replaced by a flicker of panicked indecision. The one with the gun, a dark silhouette, slowly raised it, pointing it directly at us, a silent threat. But the rapidly approaching sound of the sirens, growing louder and louder, made him hesitate, a crucial, life-saving pause. It was the longest 2 minutes of my entire life. Standing there with Emily huddled desperately behind me, watching these men grapple with their terrifying choice, to shoot us down in cold blood or to flee into the night. In the end, thankfully, Self-preservation won out. They scrambled back into their van, engines roaring to life, and sped off into the darkness, disappearing just as the first police car, its flashing lights a brilliant blinding beacon, rounded the corner. What followed was a disorienting whirlwind of questions, official statements, and barely contained chaos. Emily was immediately whisked away to the hospital, her frail body needing urgent care, and I spent what felt like an eternity, long, exhausting hours, talking to local cops, and then, as the sun began its ascent, to grim-faced FBI agents who had descended upon the scene. They found the compound Emily had bravely told me about 3 days later. 17 kids were rescued, their faces gaunt, their eyes hollow, some of whom had been missing for years, their lives on hold. The men who had chased us, a desperate, professional group, were apprehended attempting to cross the Canadian border. Their reign of terror finally at an end. Months later, after the grueling trials were finally over and the media frenzy had, thankfully, died down, I received a letter. It was from Emily. She wrote about her slow, painful recovery, her emotional reunion with her shattered family, and her tentative plans for a future that had almost been stolen from her. But what truly resonated with me, what burrowed deep into my soul, were her final words. "You could have driven away that night," she wrote, her handwriting clear, precise. "You could have believed their lies or simply decided it wasn't your problem. But you didn't. You chose to help a stranger, and in doing so, you saved not just my life, but the lives of so many others. I'll never be able to thank you enough. But I promise to live my life in a way that truly honors what you did for me. You're my hero, and I'll never forget you." I folded the letter carefully, meticulously, and tucked it into my wallet, where it remains to this very day, a cherished talisman, a silent reminder. Sometimes on those long, solitary nights when the road seems endless, stretching into infinity, and the world feels cold and indifferent, I take it out and read it again. It reminds me with a powerful, undeniable force that even in our darkest, most desperate moments, there is always, always hope. And sometimes all it takes to irrevocably change a life, or many lives, is the simple, profound courage to help a stranger in dire need. As I drive my routes now, the familiar hum of the engine a comforting drone. I keep a sharper, more vigilant eye out at those lonely, desolate rest stops. Not out of lingering fear, but with a newfound, profound knowledge that you never truly know when you might be called upon, unexpectedly, to make a profound difference. That night changed me to my core, irrevocably. It showed me the terrifying depths of human cruelty, yes, but also the astonishing heights of human resilience. The unbreakable spirit of the human heart. But more than anything, it taught me that we all possess the inherent power to be heroes in our own unique way. All we have to do is be willing to act when the moment, that crucial, pivotal moment, finally comes. Story 5. The key turned in the lock with an ominous click. A sound that echoed like a death knell in the quiet house, and a cold certainty washed over me. We'd made a terrible mistake. What we had naively believed was just another forgotten room in our beautiful new home was about to unleash a secret. A dark, buried truth that would utterly shatter our lives forever. As the door swung inward with a mournful groan, a musty, suffocating air billowed out, thick with the scent of dust and decay. But beneath that, something far more sinister lingered, a faint, cloying sweetness that spoke of secrets long interred and horrors best left undisturbed. It was the whisper of a past we were never meant to uncover. We had been so utterly thrilled when we first found the house. Sarah and I had tirelessly scoured listings for months, our hearts set on discovering the perfect sanctuary in which to nurture our burgeoning family to plant roots. This particular Victorian beauty, with its sprawling wraparound porch and intricate, delicate woodwork, had seemed like a dream made tangible, a vision of domestic bliss. Sure, it plainly needed some significant work, its age showing in a charming but demanding way. But at such an incredibly appealing price, we simply couldn't pass it up. The realtor, a woman of practiced vagueness, had been curiously noncommittal about the previous owners. mentioning only that the house had been languishing in probate for quite some time. We hadn't given it a second thought then. Old houses, after all, frequently came with complicated, layered histories, and our fervent hope was entirely on the future we were so eagerly going to build within its walls. The initial few weeks were a delightful whirlwind of activity. Unpacking countless moving boxes, painting walls with fresh, hopeful colors, and enthusiastically poring over renovation plans. We threw ourselves into the joyful task of making the house unequivocally our own, reveling in the sheer excitement of finally achieving homeownership. But as the days gracefully transitioned into weeks, subtle, unsettling anomalies began to prick at my subconscious, tiny fissures in our idyllic dream. It was nothing major at first, just faint, inexplicable noises echoing in the quiet of the night, or the unnerving sensation of being watched, a persistent, chilling presence whenever I found myself alone in a room. I rationalized it away, attributing it to the unfamiliarity of a new dwelling, the natural groans and shifts of an old house settling into its foundations. Sarah, ever practical, gently teased me about being jumpy, but even I could discern the faint flicker of unease, the subtle shadow of apprehension in her own eyes. Then we found the door. It was cunningly concealed behind an immense, antique wardrobe in the very room we had so lovingly earmarked to transform into the nursery. We only stumbled upon it by sheer chance while meticulously repositioning furniture, earnestly striving to determine the perfect layout for our future baby's room. The wardrobe, a heavy, imposing piece, had left distinct, rectangular marks on the faded wallpaper, a ghost of its long-standing presence. As I was closely examining these marks, my hand brushed inadvertently against something that felt distinctly different. An almost imperceptible seam in the wall, a seam that would have remained utterly invisible unless you were specifically looking for it, unless you knew it was there. Driven by a surge of consuming curiosity, we carefully peeled back the aged wallpaper, revealing the undeniable presence of a hidden door. It was crafted from solid, imposing oak, and bore an antique brass lock that, strikingly, appeared far newer than the venerable age of the house itself. We diligently scoured the entirety of the house, a fruitless search for a key that might fit its archaic mechanism, but our efforts proved utterly futile. That tantalizing, enigmatic door quickly became an consuming obsession for both of us. What, we endlessly wondered, lay concealed behind its impenetrable surface? Why had someone gone to such extraordinary lengths to meticulously hide its existence? We earnestly debated the wisdom of calling a locksmith, but an inexplicable reluctance held us back. A silent, internal warning felt profoundly wrong, like we would be irrevocably crossing an unspoken line, intruding upon a secret we were fundamentally not meant to discover. Yet the gnawing mystery relentlessly consumed us. We'd lie awake long into the night, our minds racing, speculating wildly about what could possibly be hidden within the very confines of our own home. A secret room, perhaps, overflowing with priceless antique treasures. Or something far, far darker. It was Sarah who, with a newfound resolve, finally made the decisive choice. She arrived home one day, a locksmith's business card clutched firmly in her hand, her expression a potent mixture of eager excitement and palpable apprehension. "I can't take it anymore," she declared, her voice a low, determined murmur. "We need to know." The locksmith, an older, weathered man with kind, knowing eyes and gnarled hands that spoke volumes of decades of experience, arrived the very next morning. As he meticulously worked on the stubborn lock, he chatted amiably, weaving tales of other old houses he'd encountered, the peculiar secrets they had reluctantly yielded. "You'd be surprised," he mused, his tools clicking softly, rhythmically in the lock. "People hide all sorts of things in these old places. Once found a whole room full of Prohibition-era hooch behind a fake wall." I chuckled nervously, a strained, unnatural sound, desperately trying to ignore the tight knot of burgeoning anxiety that was constricting my stomach. What, I wondered with a morbid fascination, would we discover? A part of me, a small, adventurous part, was genuinely thrilled at the exhilarating prospect of uncovering some long-lost, hidden treasure. But another part, a primal, terrified part one desperately tried to suppress, was utterly terrified of what unspeakable horror might be patiently waiting for us on the other side. The lock finally surrendered with a soft, definitive click. The locksmith stepped back, a satisfied, knowing smile spreading across his face. "There you go, folks," he announced, his voice jovial. "Whatever's in there, it's all yours now." Sarah and I exchanged a loaded look, our eyes silently communicating the profound weight of the moment. This was it, the moment of truth. With a deep, fortifying breath, I reached out my trembling hand for the handle and pushed the door open. The smell hit us first, an immediate, overwhelming assault on our senses. Musty and stale, yes, but with an underlying, sickening sweetness that instantly churned my stomach. As our eyes slowly adjusted to the profound gloom of the room, indistinct shapes began to reluctantly emerge from the oppressive darkness. Shelves lined the walls, crammed haphazardly with countless books and strange, unidentifiable objects. In the unsettling center of the room, a large table stood, its surface meticulously covered in papers and what appeared to be scientific equipment. But it was the far wall that truly commanded our attention, drawing our gaze like an unseen, malevolent force. There, dimly illuminated by the weak, ethereal light filtering in from the open doorway, hung a colossal corkboard, and pinned to it were photographs, dozens of them, perhaps even hundreds, overlapping and crowding each other in a grotesque mosaic. As we stepped closer, an agonizing, slow approach, the horrifying details abruptly snapped into sharp focus, and I felt the blood drain from my face, leaving it cold and clammy. The photos were of people, men, women, children, of all ages and races. But these were no ordinary photographs. These people looked utterly terrified, their faces grotesquely contorted in masks of raw fear or agonizing pain. Some were bound, their limbs twisted and restrained. Others bore unmistakable signs of brutal injury, visible wounds. And chillingly, intimately, beside each photograph was a precise date and a set of meticulous notes, scrawled in cramped, unsettlingly neat handwriting. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered, her voice a strangled gasp, her hand clutching mine so tightly it actually hurt, a desperate, white-knuckled grip. "What is this?" I couldn't answer, my voice trapped in my throat, my mind reeling. My eyes had locked onto a horrifyingly familiar face among the sea of tormented visages. It was our next-door neighbor, Mrs. Carlson, the sweet, kindly old lady who had, with such innocent charm, brought us a welcoming pie when we first moved in, a gesture of neighborly kindness. In the photograph, her face was brutally bruised, her eyes wide with a primal, unadulterated terror. The date on the photo was from last year, a chillingly recent entry. My mind reeled, desperately trying to make some semblance of sense of the impossible tableau I was witnessing. This couldn't be real. It had to be some kind of sick, elaborate joke, a grotesque prank. Or perhaps an abandoned movie prop left behind by previous, long-gone owners. But deep down, a cold, undeniable certainty resonated within me. This was horrifyingly, unequivocally real. We had stumbled into something profoundly dark and unspeakably terrible. Something that had been meticulously transpiring right under our oblivious noses. Sarah's piercing scream snapped me violently back to the horrifying reality of the moment. She was pointing, her hand shaking uncontrollably, at another photograph. A new addition to the macabre gallery. It was us. The picture had clearly been taken very recently, showing Sarah and me standing innocently on our front porch, utterly unaware we were being watched. Oblivious to the predatory gaze. The date on that photo was from just a week ago, fresh, damning evidence. And chillingly, intimately beside it was a single, stark word that made my blood run cold. freezing in my veins. Soon, we ran. We didn't stop, didn't pause to grab anything, didn't even remember to lock the front door behind us in our desperate flight. We just ran, a panicked, stumbling dash, piling into our car and speeding away from the house that had, in a single, terrifying instant, transformed from our cherished dream home into an unspeakable nightmare. We drove straight to the police station, our words tumbling out in a frantic, incoherent jumble as we desperately tried to articulate the horrifying discovery we had made. The officers, initially skeptical, their faces masks of doubt, but something in the raw, unadulterated terror radiating from us must have finally convinced them. They dispatched a team to the house immediately. A grim procession. What they found there unequivocally confirmed our absolute worst fears. The hidden room was a meticulous, horrifying record of decades of abductions and unspeakable murders. The countless books lining the shelves were not mere volumes, but chilling journals, detailing each horrific crime in excruciating, depraved detail. The equipment on the table, once a mystery, was identified as instruments for processing victims, tools of an unimaginable trade. And in a secret compartment cunningly concealed beneath the floorboards, they made the most gruesome discovery of all. Human remains, silent, horrifying witnesses to a long reign of terror. The ensuing investigation turned our once quiet neighborhood utterly upside down, ripping through its placid facade. It was revealed that the previous owner of our house, a seemingly innocuous man named Gerald Hoffman, had been a prolific serial killer, active for over 3 decades. He had, ironically, died of a heart attack 6 months before we purchased the house, taking his monstrous secrets, or so he believed, to his grave. The case exploded onto national news, a chilling expose. Families of long-missing persons finally received agonizing, long-awaited answers. Cold cases, once frozen in time, were at last solved, bringing a modicum of closure to years of unanswered pain. And our little town, once so unremarkable, became irrevocably synonymous with the unspeakable horrors that had been so meticulously hidden behind its closed doors. As for Sarah and me, staying was an unthinkable impossibility. The house, once so vibrant with promise, now felt utterly tainted beyond any hope of redemption. We sold it for a mere fraction of what we paid, not caring in the slightest about the significant financial loss. Our sole, desperate desire was to escape, to put as much distance as possible between ourselves and that place, to somehow, impossibly forget what we'd witnessed. We moved clear across the country, a desperate attempt to outrun the relentless nightmares that relentlessly followed us, clinging to our every shadow. But some things, some indelible marks, you simply cannot escape. I still awaken in cold sweats, the faces from those haunting photographs burned irrevocably into my memory. A permanent gallery of despair. Sarah jumps at every unexpected noise, her nerves frayed, a constant state of apprehension. And the excitement we once felt about starting a family, that bright, hopeful dream, has been tragically replaced by a deep-seated, pervasive fear of the very world we would be bringing a child into. They say ignorance is bliss, and now, with a chilling understanding, I fully grasp the profound truth of that old adage. We had uncovered a truth too terrible to bear, a darkness that had been meticulously hiding in plain sight, an insidious evil woven into the very fabric of our seemingly normal existence. Our innocence, our cherished sense of safety in the world, had been utterly shattered the moment that key had turned, with its ominous click in the lock. As I sit here, painstakingly writing this down, I can't help but wonder, how many other houses hold similar, unspeakable secrets? How many other families are living their lives blissfully unaware of the horrors that might be patiently hidden behind their unsuspecting walls? I don't possess any answers. All I know, with a profound, chilling certainty, is that sometimes locked doors are locked for a very terrifying reason. And some secrets, once cruelly revealed, can never, ever be truly forgotten. Our new home is small, comforting in its lack of mystery with no hidden rooms or ominous locked doors. And that, in this new, terrifying reality, is precisely how we like it. Story 6. The first time I noticed the vase had moved, I told myself I was imagining things. By the third time, a chilling certainty settled in. Someone or something was undeniably in the house with me. What I didn't know was that my quiet house-sitting gig was about to become a waking nightmare. It was supposed to be an easy job. My friend, Clara, was embarking on a month-long backpacking adventure through Southeast Asia, and she needed someone reliable to watch her charming craftsman house and, more importantly, care for her aloof but beloved cat. I jumped at the chance a whole glorious month in a beautiful, spacious home, far removed from my noisy, cramped apartment and my constantly bickering roommates. It sounded like an absolute slice of heaven. The first few days were pure, unadulterated bliss. I spent my time leisurely exploring the house, admiring Clara's eclectic art collection, each piece a conversation starter, and curling up with a good book in the sun-drenched reading nook. The cat, a sleek Siamese named Bartholomew, was, as expected, a creature of lofty indifference but pleasantly low maintenance. I settled into an easy, comfortable routine, working remotely during the day, my laptop perched on the kitchen island, and luxuriating in the profound peace and quiet of the evenings. It was on the fourth night that a subtle, unsettling feeling began to prick at my subconscious. I was in the kitchen, humming softly as I prepared dinner when a distinct sensation washed over me, the unmistakable feeling that someone or something was watching me. I spun around, half expecting to see Bartholomew perched conspiratorially on the counter, but the room was utterly empty. I shrugged it off, dismissing it as a common anxiety born from being in an unfamiliar house. Yet, the feeling persisted, a lingering, icy shadow. Over the next few days, I found myself constantly glancing over my shoulder, startling violently at the slightest, unexpected noises. I repeatedly told myself I was being silly, that it was merely the natural creaks and groans of an old house settling. But deep down, an insidious seed of unease had been planted, taking root. Then, things began to move. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly. A book I could have sworn I'd left on the coffee table was suddenly, inexplicably, on the bookshelf. The throw pillows on the couch were rearranged differently than I vividly remembered placing them. Little things easily dismissed as simple forgetfulness on my part, or perhaps the mischievous antics of the cat. But then my attention snagged on the vase. It was a striking, exquisite piece, hand-blown glass in mesmerizing swirls of deep blue and vibrant green. Clara had displayed it prominently, almost reverently, on a small side table in the living room. One crisp morning, I walked into the room and stopped dead in my tracks, a jolt of cold realization. The vase was now perched precariously on the mantel above the fireplace. I stood there, staring at it, my mind racing, scrambling for a rational explanation. I knew with absolute certainty that I hadn't moved it, and Bartholomew, while a creature of boundless mischief, couldn't possibly have lifted such a heavy, substantial piece. For a fleeting moment, a desperate thought crossed my mind. Had Clara returned early, intent on playing an elaborate prank on me? But no, that was utterly ridiculous. She was at this very moment halfway across Europe. I carefully picked up the vase and returned it to its original, designated spot, trying desperately to shake off the profound, unsettling feeling that was rapidly settling in my stomach. But over the next few unsettling days, I continued to discover the vase in a new, impossible spot every single morning. It appeared on the dining room table, then in the study, and once, inexplicably floating serenely in the bathtub. Each time, I would dutifully return it to its proper place, and each time, my sense of gnawing unease grew, a chilling tide. I began to have profound trouble sleeping, lying awake for hours in the oppressive darkness, straining every nerve, every fiber of my being, to hear any sound, any subtle hint of movement within the house. but it remained stubbornly, unnervingly silent. I considered calling Clara, but what on earth would I say? That I suspected her beautiful house was haunted? That someone was breaking in every single night just to meticulously rearrange a vase? That sounded utterly insane. So, I kept my silence, a desperate hope flickering within me that whatever insidious presence was at play would simply cease on its own. It didn't. If anything, the unsettling occurrences escalated, growing bolder, more menacing. One night, approximately 2 weeks into my stay, I was abruptly jolted awake by the faint, ethereal sound of music playing softly downstairs. It was an old jazz tune, a melancholic melody precisely the kind Clara adored. My heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, I crept cautiously down the stairs, a heavy metal flashlight clutched firmly in my hand. A pathetic but comforting makeshift weapon. The music, faint and ghostly, was emanating from the study. As I approached, I saw a faint, pale light spilling out from under the closed door. A beckoning glow into the unknown. I took a deep, fortifying breath, steeling myself for whatever lay beyond, and pushed the door open slowly. The room was utterly empty, bathed in the soft, ambient glow. The old record player in the corner was on, its vinyl disc spinning silently now that the song had reached its haunting conclusion. But what truly made my blood run cold, freezing in my veins, was the chair behind the desk. It was turned to face the door, as if someone had just been sitting there, patiently waiting for my arrival. I backed slowly out of the room, my hands shaking so uncontrollably I almost dropped the precious flashlight. I spent the agonizing remainder of the night huddled miserably in my bed, every faint creak of the old house, every whisper of the wind making me flinch violently. The next morning, in the harsh, unforgiving light of day, I desperately tried to rationalize what had transpired. Perhaps I'd inadvertently turned on the record player earlier and simply forgotten about it. Perhaps the chair had always faced that peculiar way and I had simply failed to notice. But deep down, a cold, undeniable certainty resonated within me. I knew better. I started spending as much time out of the house as humanly possible, returning only out of sheer necessity to sleep and feed Bartholomew. But even then, the insidious feeling of being perpetually watched, a suffocating, unseen presence, continued to cling to me. A persistent shadow. I'd awakened to discover my personal belongings subtly rearranged. Items shifted from their usual places. Doors I'd meticulously left open were now inexplicably closed. And conversely, closed ones stood eerily ajar. One unsettling evening, I came home to find all the framed photos in the house turned face down, every single one. It took me an entire hour, my hands trembling uncontrollably, to go through each room, painstakingly writing every single frame. As I picked up the very last one, a cherished photo of Clara and me from our college days, I noticed something that sent a surge of paralyzing terror through me, making my heart stop. In the faint reflection of the glass, just over my shoulder, I saw a fleeting figure standing silently in the doorway. I whirled around, but the doorway was utterly empty. I raced through the house, my heart hammering, checking every single room, every hidden nook, but I was undeniably alone, or at least visibly alone. That was the definitive last straw. Simply couldn't remain in this house any longer. I no longer cared if Clara would be upset, or if my frantic explanation would make me sound utterly unhinged. I needed to leave. I was in the bedroom, hastily, clumsily shoving clothes into a duffel bag, when I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, methodical, coming unmistakably up the stairs. I froze, every muscle in my body rigid, my heart pounding so violently I was convinced it might burst from my chest. The footsteps stopped just outside the bedroom door. For a long, agonizing moment, there was only a profound, suffocating silence. Then, slowly, infinitesimally, the door handle began to turn. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The door swung open, revealing nothing. The hallway beyond was utterly empty. But then, as if drawn by an unseen, malevolent hand, my half-packed suitcase slid eerily across the polished floor and out into the empty hall. The door slammed shut with a deafening bang that made me jump, a visceral shock of terror. I was trapped. Whatever insidious presence was in this house, it unequivocally did not want me to leave. Panic clawed at my throat, a suffocating, icy hand as I frantically searched for a way out. The window was far too high to jump, a perilous leap, and my phone had no signal. It hadn't for days. I realized now with dawning horror. How had I not noticed that crucial detail before? As I stood there, trembling, desperately trying to formulate a plan, to figure out what terrifying action to take. The temperature in the room abruptly plummeted. My breath plumed out in visible, frosty puffs, and I could clearly see a delicate layer of frost forming on the inside of the windows. Then, words, stark and chilling, began to appear in the frost as if meticulously written by an unseen, ethereal finger. "Stay with us." I screamed. I couldn't help it. The sound tore from my throat. Raw and primal, a desperate, animalistic cry. I threw myself at the door, twisting the handle frantically, desperately, but it wouldn't budge. It was locked, sealed, an impenetrable barrier. Just when I thought I couldn't endure another second, when I was certain I was on the precipice of losing my mind entirely, everything abruptly stopped. The room slowly warmed. The frost vanished as quickly as it had appeared, and the door, with an unnerving ease, swung open under my frantic hand. I didn't wait to see what unspeakable horror would happen next. I ran. A desperate, blind sprint, barely pausing to snatch my phone and keys before I burst out the front door and scrambled into my car. I drove for hours, a blur of panicked motion. Not caring in the slightest where I was going, only needing to put as much distance as humanly possible between myself and that terrifying house. When I finally pulled over, somewhere in the next state, my body trembling with residual fear, I saw dozens of missed calls from Clara. With shaking hands, I called her back. "Oh, thank God," she exclaimed, her voice thick with relief when she finally answered. "I've been trying to reach you for days. Listen, I need you to get out of the house now." I laughed, a slightly hysterical, broken sound. "I'm already gone, Clara. What the hell is going on in that house?" She was quiet for a long, agonizing moment. When she spoke again, her voice was heavy with a profound, crushing guilt. "I'm so sorry. I should have told you before I left. The house, it's not normal. Things happen there that I can't explain. I thought maybe it would be different for you, that it was just me. I never should have asked you to stay there. Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice cracking with emotion. Raw hurt. "Would you have believed me?" She countered, a poignant question. "I barely believe it myself, and I've lived there for years. I'm coming home. We'll figure this out. I promise." As I hung up the phone, I realized with a strange sense of detachment that my hands had finally stopped shaking. The raw fear was still present, a lingering ache, but it was now overshadowed by a grim, unyielding determination. Whatever sinister entity was in that house, and whatever malevolent force had tried to imprison me there, it wasn't over. Clara was coming home, and together, we were going to get to the terrifying bottom of this. But one thing was absolutely certain: I was never, ever setting foot in that house again. Some things, once seen, can never be unseen. Their images burned irrevocably into the mind, and some presences, once felt, leave an indelible mark, a chilling imprint that never quite fades. The house may have desperately wanted me to stay, to become a part of its dark tapestry, but I had chosen to run. And in doing so, I may have saved more than just my sanity. I may have truly saved my very soul. Story 7. The message glowed ominously on my phone screen. "I see you." My heart skipped a beat, a sudden, frantic flutter as I instinctively glanced around the sparsely populated coffee shop. There was no one overtly watching me, no lingering gaze, no suspicious figure hunched over a laptop. Who could have possibly sent this? That's when the dawning horror solidified, a cold, undeniable certainty. This wasn't merely a wrong number, nor was it a harmless prank. Someone was meticulously watching me, and they knew far more about my life, my private existence, than any stranger should. It had begun innocently enough. A casual text message from an unknown number, asking if I was enjoying my latte. I brushed it off. A mere misdial. Someone texting the wrong Alex. But then another message had vibrated through, commenting chillingly on the specific book I was engrossed in, the one resting open on the table before me. My blood ran cold, a sudden, icy dread. This person could not only see me, but they knew precisely where I was, what I was doing, what I was reading. I gathered my belongings with a practiced, almost unnatural swiftness, striving to project an outward calm that utterly belied the frantic, racing chaos in my mind. As I stepped out onto the bustling street, a vibrant river of humanity, my phone buzzed again, a sinister, low hum. Heading home so soon? But the day is just getting started. I quickened my pace, weaving deftly through the indifferent crowd, my eyes darting frantically, desperately trying to spot anyone, any single soul who might be following me, tracking my movements. But everyone seemed utterly absorbed in their own worlds, their own hurried narratives. No one paying any particular attention to me, an anonymous figure swallowed by the tide. When I finally reached the supposed sanctuary of my apartment building, I practically slammed the door shut behind me, leaning against its solid, reassuring weight as I fought to catch my ragged breath. Surely here I would be safe. But then, another message. A fresh spike of terror. Nice place. I especially like the blue curtains in your bedroom. My stomach plummeted, a nauseating drop. How could they possibly know that? I had only hung those specific curtains last week. A small, personal touch to my private space. I ran to the window, my hands trembling uncontrollably, yanking the curtains closed with a desperate ferocity, then repeated the action throughout the entire apartment, sealing myself off from the unseen gaze. My hands were shaking so violently, so uncontrollably I could barely even grip my phone. I considered fleetingly calling the police. But what precisely would I tell them? That I was receiving unsettling, creepy text messages? They would undoubtedly advise me to simply block the number and forget about it. But I knew with a bone-deep certainty that this was far more than just a random creep. This person knew things about me, intimate details of my life, things they unequivocally should not be able to know. Over the next few agonizing days, the relentless cascade of messages continued. They knew when I left for work, the specific details of what I ate for lunch, the names of the colleagues I spoke to. It was as if they possessed complete, unfettered access to every single aspect of my life, a terrifying digital omnipresence. I desperately changed my phone number, a futile attempt at severance, but somehow, impossibly, they still found me. I even sought refuge with friends, sleeping on various couches, but the messages, like malevolent shadows, followed me there too. Having fun at Sarah's? Tell her I said hi. I became a nervous wreck, a raw bundle of frayed nerves, jumping violently at every single notification, constantly glancing over my shoulder, consumed by a suffocating paranoia. My friends, bless their oblivious hearts, began to express genuine worry, gently suggesting I was becoming overly paranoid, losing my grip on reality. But how, I wondered desperately, could I possibly articulate to them the sheer, consuming terror of knowing that someone, somewhere, was meticulously watching my every single move, a silent, unseen predator? After a week of this relentless psychological torture, a crushing weight of perpetual surveillance, I finally reached my breaking point. I had to act. I simply couldn't endure living like this anymore, a prisoner in my own skin, in my own life. With a surge of desperate resolve, I messaged back, for the very first time, a bold, defiant act. "Who are you? What do you want?" The response came almost immediately, the digital words appearing as if by magic. "I want you to know how it feels to have your privacy invaded. Your life laid bare for someone else's amusement." I stared at the message, a sudden, chilling confusion seizing me. What did they mean? Had I unknowingly done something to truly deserve this profound, terrifying retaliation? And then it hit me, a sickening jolt of recognition, a memory from years ago, buried deep, a stupid, thoughtless mistake I had made back in college. I'd been a foolish, arrogant participant in a small group that had, in a moment of reckless abandon, hacked into the school system, accessing private, sensitive information about other unsuspecting students. We had naively believed it was nothing more than a harmless prank, a clever, innocuous way to flaunt our nascent tech skills, to impress each other. But for some of those students, the consequences had been devastating, irrevocably life-altering. Relationships had been brutally ruined, reputations irrevocably damaged. Futures derailed. We had eventually been caught, yes, but I, by some stroke of luck or cunning, had managed to avoid any truly serious consequences, any lasting repercussions. I had successfully put it behind me, pushed the uncomfortable memory into the furthest recesses of my mind, tried desperately to forget about it entirely. But someone, it was chillingly clear now, had not forgotten. Someone had been waiting, planning. Their retribution, meticulously crafted, patiently executed. With shaking fingers, a profound sense of dawning dread. I typed out a desperate response. "Jamie, is that you?" The pause before the next message arrived felt like an eternity, an agonizing stretch of silent judgment. Finally, my phone buzzed again. "So you do remember. I'm impressed. Jamie." He had been one of the students most profoundly affected by our reckless hack. He had quietly left the school shortly after the incident, and I had never known what had truly become of him. Now, with a horrifying clarity, I knew. He had been meticulously honing his skills, patiently waiting for the perfect, most excruciating moment to turn the tables, to unleash his meticulously planned revenge. "I'm sorry," I typed, the words feeling utterly inadequate, hollow even as I sent them, a flimsy attempt at atonement for a past transgression. What we did was wrong. I know that now. "Sorry doesn't undo the damage," came the immediate, curt reply. "But it's a start." Over the next hour, Jamie and I messaged back and forth. A strange, tense, digital confession. I learned the chilling intricacies of his surveillance, how he had been relentlessly tracking me, employing a terrifyingly sophisticated combination of hacked security cameras, precise GPS data siphoned from my phone, and unsettlingly detailed information gleaned from my public social media accounts. It was, I grudgingly admitted, both profoundly impressive and utterly terrifying. "Why now?" I asked. A lingering question. Why wait all these years? "I needed time," Jamie replied, his words concise, deliberate. "Time to learn, to plan. And I wanted you to have something to lose. A life you valued. Privacy you took for granted." I couldn't argue with that chilling assessment. The past week had served as an agonizing, brutal lesson, showing me precisely how precious privacy truly was. How utterly vulnerable we all were in this increasingly interconnected world. "What happens now?" I asked, dreading the inevitable, agonizing answer. There was a long, pregnant pause, a moment of profound uncertainty before Jamie's chilling response finally appeared on my screen. "That depends on you. I could release everything I've gathered. Every embarrassing moment. Every private conversation. I could destroy your life the way you helped destroy mine." My heart was pounding, a frantic drum, as I waited, breath held, for the next message. Or, Jamie continued, the single word hanging in the digital air, "You could help me." "Help you how?" I typed, a desperate, hesitant question, not entirely sure I wanted to know the answer. "There are others. He explained, from our group who never faced consequences. And there are people out there right now doing what we did, thinking it's just a game. They need to be stopped. I sat there, staring at my phone, my mind reeling, a chaotic storm of conflicting emotions. Was Jamie truly suggesting we become some kind of digital vigilantes, avenging angels in the vast, murky expanse of the internet? It sounded utterly crazy, dangerous even, but a persistent, insistent part of me, the part that had been racked with guilt and quiet remorse all these years, saw it undeniably as a chance for profound redemption. If I help you, I typed slowly, deliberately, will you stop watching me? Delete everything you've gathered? Yes, came the immediate, unequivocal reply. You have my word. I took a deep, fortifying breath, a silent acknowledgement, knowing with a profound certainty that my answer, this single, momentous decision, would irrevocably change my life forever. But hadn't it already been changed, irrevocably, by the terrifying events of the past week? Could I genuinely go back to my former, normal life? Pretending this horrifying episode had never even occurred? Okay, I finally replied, the single word of profound commitment. I'm in. Good, Jamie responded, the digital text appearing almost instantly. Check your email. I've sent you instructions for our first target. As I slowly opened my laptop, the screen a glowing portal to a new, terrifying reality, I felt a complex mix of raw fear and a strange, nascent excitement. I was stepping, consciously, willingly, into a world I had believed I had definitively left behind. A chapter closed, but this time I would be using my skills, my once misguided talents, to help people, to protect the vulnerable, not to cause them profound, lasting harm. The next few months were a blur, a whirlwind of frantic activity. Jamie and I worked tirelessly, a strange, unlikely duo exposing insidious hackers, meticulously shutting down pervasive invasion of privacy operations and diligently educating unsuspecting people about the crucial importance of online security. It was challenging, yes, often scary work, pushing me far beyond my comfort zone, but for the very first time in years, a profound sense of purpose filled me. I felt, truly, that I was doing something genuinely meaningful. Something that truly mattered. True to his word, Jamie meticulously deleted all the compromising information he had so chillingly gathered on me. Our strange, unexpected relationship evolved, transforming from one rooted in raw fear and bitter resentment into a weary, respectful partnership, and eventually, surprisingly, into something resembling a quiet, profound friendship. Looking back now, from the vantage point of newfound clarity, I can't help but marvel at how profoundly my life has been transformed. That first terrifying, seemingly innocuous message, "I see you," had, in its chilling simplicity, set me on a path I never could have possibly imagined. It had taught me the true, immeasurable value of privacy, the profound weight of our actions, and the unexpected, transformative power of redemption. Now, when I walk down a bustling street or sit quietly in a coffee shop, immersed in the gentle hum of everyday life, I no longer feel perpetually watched, a silent target. But I do feel something else, something far more profound. I feel acutely aware. Aware of the vast, intricate digital world swirling invisibly around us, of the profound responsibility we all share to protect ourselves and, crucially, to protect others in this increasingly interconnected, often dangerous age. And sometimes, when my phone buzzes softly with a new message, a faint flutter of anxiety still stirs within me, a phantom echo of past terror. But more often than not, it's just Jamie sending me the precise details of our next crucial mission. Because in this complex, ever-evolving digital age, there's always another wrong to meticulously right, another privacy to fiercely protect. And thanks to one terrifying week of being watched, I'm now the watcher, the protector, striving relentlessly to make the online world just a little bit safer, a little bit more secure for everyone. Story 8. The moment we pulled into the long gravel driveway of that isolated farmhouse, a cold, undeniable certainty washed over me. Something was terribly, fundamentally wrong. The almost imperceptible flicker of movement behind a curtain, the eerie, suffocating silence that blanketed the entire property, absorbing all sound, it all screamed danger, a primal, insistent warning. But with our car sputtering its last, a dying gasp of defiance, and night falling with merciless speed, casting long, menacing shadows across the landscape, we had no choice but to approach. Little did we know we were walking straight into a meticulously laid trap, one that would test the very limits of our survival instincts. It had begun as a quintessential, joyous road trip. My girlfriend, Lena, and I had been dating for 6 blissful months. A whirlwind of new discoveries and shared laughter, and we'd eagerly planned this weekend getaway. A romantic escape, convinced it would be the perfect way to celebrate our blossoming connection. We'd meticulously chosen a quaint bed and breakfast, its charm advertised in glowing brochures, nestled approximately 4 hours from the chaotic pulse of the city, deep within the tranquil embrace of the countryside. The drive itself had been utterly beautiful, a painter's canvas of rolling, emerald hills and picturesque, storybook farms, bathed in the golden hues of late afternoon sun. But as the sun began its slow, deliberate descent below the horizon, casting the world in a bruised violet light, things began their insidious unraveling. First, our trusty GPS, a digital lifeline, abruptly lost its signal, plunging us into an archaic reliance on the spotty, half-remembered directions I'd hastily scribbled down from a map. Then the car, our reliable companion, began emitting an ominous, rattling noise, a mechanical death rattle that vibrated through the floorboards. We pressed on, our hopes stubbornly clinging to the idea of making it to our cozy destination before anything truly serious occurred. We didn't make it. About an hour from where we optimistically believed our B&B should be, the car gave a final, desperate, sputtering gasp and died. We coasted to a silent, ignominious stop on the crumbling shoulder of a narrow, forgotten country road, surrounded by an overwhelming expanse of endless fields and dense, silent forests, with no discernible signs of civilization in sight. Great, Lena sighed, a profound weariness in her voice, leaning back against the seat with a defeated slump. Now what? I pulled out my phone. A futile gesture, but as expected, the screen displayed the grim, familiar message, no signal. I guess we start walking, I said, attempting to inject a confidence into my voice that I was far from feeling. There has to be a house around here somewhere. Maybe they'll have a phone we can use. We grabbed our jackets and a trusty flashlight from the trunk, our meager provisions against the encroaching darkness and the unknown, and set off, 2 small figures dwarfed by the vast, indifferent landscape. The sun was sinking fast now, a fiery orb melting into the horizon, casting long, grotesque shadows across the landscape. An unseasonably cold wind, a biting whisper of winter, had picked up, and I could feel Lena shivering visibly beside me, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. We'd been walking for approximately 20 minutes when we saw it, a dirt driveway, a faint, almost swallowed path branching off from the main road, leading into the deepening shadows. It wound its way towards a large, imposing farmhouse set back from the road, a solitary sentinel. Faint, inviting lights glowed from a couple of its windows, and an old pickup truck, a rusty, weathered relic, was parked out front. It looked, to our desperate, weary eyes, like our absolute best hope, a beacon in the growing darkness. As we turned up the driveway, that's when I first truly felt it, a profound, unsettling sense of unease that settled like a lead weight in the pit of my stomach. The house, at first glance, appeared perfectly normal, an archetypal old farmhouse with peeling white paint and a classic wraparound porch. But something about it felt profoundly off. I couldn't quite pinpoint what it was, couldn't articulate the unsettling sensation, but every primal instinct I possessed screamed at me, a silent, insistent warning to turn around, to flee. Yet, we were cold, bone-weary, and utterly devoid of other options. So, against the clamoring warnings of my gut, we pressed on. We were about halfway up the long driveway when I saw the curtain move. Just a slight, almost imperceptible twitch, but enough to convey a chilling truth. Someone was watching us approach, a hidden, silent observer. I squeezed Lena's hand, a desperate attempt to convey a reassurance I was far from feeling, a fragile connection in the encroaching dread. We reached the porch steps, creaking under our uncertain weight, and I took a deep, fortifying breath before raising my hand to knock on the heavy wooden door. For a long, agonizing moment, there was nothing but the sound of my own hammering heart. Then, slowly, infinitesimally, we heard footsteps approaching, a soft shuffle growing louder. The door creaked open, just a sliver, revealing a man in his 60s, his face a canvas of weathered skin, his eyes a sharp, unsettling blue that seemed to bore right through us. A penetrating gaze. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice gruff, uninviting. I quickly explained our predicament. The broken-down car, the infuriating lack of cell service, our desperate need to simply use a phone. As I spoke, I noticed the man's eyes flicking back and forth between us, assessing, weighing, scrutinizing. It made me profoundly nervous, but I rationalized it away, attributing it to the natural suspicion of strangers in such a remote area. Finally, he gave a curt nod. "All right, come on in." Phones in the kitchen. We stepped inside, and an immediate, visceral shiver ran down my spine, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. The house smelled profoundly musty, a cloying, suffocating odor with an underlying, faintly sweet scent I couldn't quite place, but which inexplicably made my stomach churn with revulsion. The decor was undeniably old-fashioned, a time capsule, but what truly struck me was how utterly unlived in it felt, like a meticulously preserved museum exhibit rather than a genuine, breathing home. The man, who eventually introduced himself curtly as Frank, led us directly to the kitchen. An older woman stood at the sink, her back to us, a still, silent figure. She turned slowly as we entered, and I had to actively suppress a gasp. Her face was utterly blank, expressionless, her eyes as empty and vacant as a doll's, devoid of any discernible emotion. "This is my wife, Martha," Frank stated, his voice flat, unremarkable. Martha did not speak, did not move beyond a barely perceptible nod, a silent, unsettling confirmation. Frank then pointed to an old, rotary phone mounted on the wall. "There you go. You can call for a tow, but it might be a while before they can get out here. Roads can be tricky at night." I murmured my thanks and moved to the phone, while Lena stood awkwardly by the door, her posture stiff with unease. As I dialed the familiar numbers, I noticed Frank, a silent, unsettling presence, watching me intently. I tried to focus on my strained conversation with the tow company, but I couldn't shake the chilling feeling of his eyes boring into me, a tangible weight on my back. The news, when it came, was not good. The earliest they could possibly get to us was the next morning. When I hung up and relayed this grim information to Lena, I saw a fleeting, stark flash of fear flicker in her eyes. Frank cleared his throat, a loud, deliberate sound that broke the tense silence. "Well, can't have you waiting out in the cold all night. We've got a spare room upstairs. You're welcome to it." Every single instinct I possessed screamed at me to refuse, to bolt out of this house and take our chances on the desolate road, no matter the cold, no matter the darkness. But one look at Lena's pale, drawn face, her exhaustion palpable, and I knew, with a sinking certainty, that we didn't truly have much choice. It was fully dark now, and the biting wind had intensified, cutting through our jackets. We had no idea how far it truly was to the next house, to any hope of safety. "That's very kind of you," I managed, forcing a brittle, unconvincing smile. "We really appreciate it." Frank nodded, and a slow, unnerving smile spread across his face, a grotesque distortion that could not, reach his cold, calculating eyes. "It's no trouble," he said, his voice a low, almost purring sound. "We don't get many visitors out here. It'll be nice to have some company." He led us upstairs to a small, unassuming bedroom. Like the rest of the house, it felt utterly untouched, as if no one had genuinely slept there in years, a pristine, unsettling tableau. "Bathrooms down the hall," Frank offered, his voice surprisingly soft. "Sleep tight." The way he uttered those last two words, the subtle, almost imperceptible emphasis, sent a fresh wave of icy dread slithering down my spine. As soon as he left, Lena turned to me, her eyes wide, dilated with terror. "We can't stay here," she whispered, her voice trembling uncontrollably. "Something's not right." I nodded, a profound relief washing over me that she felt it too, that I wasn't losing my mind. "I know," I whispered back, "but we don't have many options right now. Let's just try to get through the night. We'll leave first thing in the morning." We lay down on the bed, fully clothed, too nervous, too deeply unsettled to change or even slip beneath the covers. Neither of us slept. Every faint creak of the old house, every mournful gust of wind outside the window had us on edge, flinching violently, our nerves strung taut. It was just past midnight when we heard it. Footsteps. In the hallway. Slow and deliberate, heavy. They paused. Right outside our door. I held my breath, my arm tightening instinctively around Lena. A desperate, protective gesture. After what felt like an eternity, an agonizing stretch of suffocating silence, the footsteps moved on, slowly receding down the hall. "We need to get out of here," Lena whispered, her voice raw with terror, trembling uncontrollably. I nodded a silent agreement. "Okay, let's go." Quietly, we crept to the door, easing it open with excruciating slowness. The hallway was plunged into profound darkness, but I could faintly make out the shadowy outline of the stairs at the far end. We tiptoed towards them, every floorboard creak, every subtle shift of weight sounding like a gunshot in the oppressive silence. We were halfway down the stairs when a single floorboard fatefully let out a particularly loud, protesting groan. Suddenly, a light flicked on downstairs, blindingly bright. "Going somewhere?" Frank's voice called out, utterly devoid of its earlier gruffness, now laced with an unnerving, knowing amusement. Abandoning all pretense of stealth, we ran. We burst out the front door and into the cold, biting night air, gasping for breath. But as we reached the bottom of the porch steps, a chilling realization solidified. We had no idea which way led back to the main road, to civilization, to safety. "This way," I gasped, choosing a direction at random, pulling Lena desperately along. We ran across the overgrown, neglected yard, the tall, sharp grass whipping painfully at our legs. Behind us, I could hear Frank's voice, now a sing-song, taunting tone that made my blood run cold. A chilling nursery rhyme of terror. Now, don't be rude. The fun's just getting started." We reached the edge of a vast cornfield and plunged headlong into its suffocating depths, the dry, brittle stalks scratching painfully at our faces and arms as we frantically pushed through the dense rows. I could hear movement behind us, the crashing, rhythmic sounds of Frank in relentless pursuit, his footsteps growing fainter, then closer again. We ran until our lungs burned, a raw, excruciating agony. Until I thought my heart might violently burst from my chest. Finally, mercifully, we broke free of the cornfield's embrace and found ourselves, panting and disoriented, on a dirt road. In the distance, through the clinging darkness, I could discern faint lights, a house, perhaps, or a gas station. "Come on," I gasped, pulling Lena desperately towards the dim, welcoming glow. Behind us, Frank's angry shouts, now laced with frustration, were growing fainter, receding into the night. We stumbled, exhausted and disheveled, into the parking lot of a small, nondescript gas station, startling the young attendant inside. He took one look at our wild, terror-filled eyes and our scratched, bloodied faces, and, without a single word, reached instinctively for the phone. The police arrived quickly, their flashing lights a brilliant, chaotic symphony against the dark night sky. As we sat, shivering, in the back of a patrol car, wrapped in thick, comforting shock blankets, I watched more police vehicles pull up, their lights cutting through the darkness, heading in the direction of Frank's remote farm. An officer, his face growing progressively grimmer with each chilling detail we shared, meticulously took our statement. It wasn't until much later, after we'd been thoroughly checked out at a local hospital and given a place to rest, a temporary sanctuary, that we learned the devastating truth. The farm had indeed belonged to Frank and Martha for decades, a seemingly idyllic, generational home. But Martha, the officer revealed, had tragically died years ago. Frank, unable to cope with the profound loss, had suffered a complete mental breakdown, utterly unable to let her go. The woman we had seen, the one with the empty, doll-like eyes, wasn't Martha at all, but one of several missing persons Frank had systematically abducted over the years, a twisted, desperate attempt to horrifyingly recreate his lost wife to fill the void. The police found damning evidence of other victims on the secluded property, a horrifying testament to his depravity. Frank was arrested, his reign of terror finally over, and the woman we had tragically believed was Martha was rescued along with 2 other captives held, unimaginably, in the hidden basement. In the days and weeks that followed, as we painstakingly gave more statements and desperately tried to process the unspeakable horror that had unfolded, one terrifying thought echoed relentlessly through my mind. How incredibly close we had come to becoming just another missing persons case. Another forgotten victim of a madman's grotesque delusion. Lena and I stayed together, our bond forged and irrevocably strengthened by our shared trauma, a silent, unspoken understanding. But we never ever took another road trip. Sometimes, when I'm driving alone down a dark road at night, the hum of the engine a comforting drone, and I see a lonely, isolated farmhouse in the distant darkness, I still feel that same chilling, profound unease that gripped me that night. And I keep driving, never stopping, always wary of the unspeakable secrets that might be patiently hiding behind a seemingly innocent, unassuming facade. Story 9. The scratching sound came again, faint but unmistakable. My blood ran cold as I realized it was coming from inside my closet. I was utterly alone in my apartment, and that closet door had been firmly shut when I went to bed. Whatever was in there now certainly hadn't come through the front door. I'd always been a light sleeper, which is probably what saved my life that night. The sound was so soft at first that I thought I might have dreamed it. But as I lay there in the oppressive darkness, straining my ears, I heard it again, a light scraping, like fingernails on wood, emanating from the direction of my bedroom closet. My immediate thought was that it must be a mouse. The building was old, a creaking relic, and I'd heard other tenants complain about rodents before. But as I listened intently, the sound became more deliberate, more rhythmic, eerily consistent. This wasn't a random, skittering commotion of a small animal. This was something else entirely, something larger, more methodical. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, my hand trembling so uncontrollably I nearly knocked it to the floor. The bright screen made me squint as I pulled up the camera app, switching it to video mode. If there was truly something in my closet, I wanted irrefutable proof. Slowly, agonizingly, I sat up in bed, every muscle tense, my eyes fixed, unblinking, on the closed closet door. The scratching had abruptly stopped, but now I could hear something else, breathing. Slow and steady, unnervingly quiet, like someone trying very, very hard to remain utterly still, utterly silent. My heart was pounding so violently I was sure whatever malevolent entity was in there must be able to hear its frantic rhythm. I wanted to run, to bolt out of my apartment, to flee into the night and never look back. But a morbid, terrifying curiosity, an irresistible pull into the abyss, kept me rooted in place, paralyzed by an unholy fascination. I had to know what was in there. With my phone held out in front of me like a fragile shield, I eased cautiously out of bed. The floor creaked mournfully under my bare feet, and I froze, waiting. My breath caught in my throat. The breathing in the closet hitched for a single, terrifying moment, then resumed its steady, horrifying rhythm. Step by agonizing step, I made my way across the room. Time seemed to stretch, each second feeling like an eternity, an endless, drawn-out torment. As I got closer, a new, unsettling smell assailed my nostrils, a musty odor, like old, stale sweat, mingled with something vaguely metallic, a coppery tang that spoke of dried blood. I was an arm's length from the closet now, my free hand hovering, trembling violently, over the doorknob. I took a deep, fortifying breath, steeling myself for the revelation, and then, in one swift, desperate motion, I yanked the door open. The smell hit me first, stronger now, almost overwhelming. Then, my eyes, struggling to adjust to the profound darkness of the closet's interior, finally discerned it. A figure. It was crouched low in the very back corner, partially hidden behind my hanging clothes, a grotesque, silent presence. It was humanoid in form, yes, but in the dim, revealing light, something about its proportions seemed fundamentally, disturbingly off. For a frozen, terrifying moment, we both remained utterly motionless, staring at each other in a silent, horrific tableau. Then, with a speed that seemed utterly impossible, a blur of unnatural motion, it lunged at me. I stumbled backward. A strangled scream caught in my throat, a sound that wouldn't escape. The creature, person, fell forward onto the bedroom floor. In the harsh, revealing light from my phone, I could now see it with horrifying clarity. It was a man, or at least it had been once. His skin was pale and waxy, stretched taut over gaunt features, his eyes sunken and wildly, disturbingly unfocused. He was emaciated, unnervingly thin, his clothes hanging off him in tattered, filthy remnants. But what struck me most, what truly made my blood run cold, were his hands. His fingers were unnaturally long, disproportionately so, the nails grown into thick, yellowed, grotesque claws. These were what had made the chilling scratching sound. He scrabbled to his feet with a jerky, unnatural motion, those terrible hands reaching, grasping for me. I turned and ran, my phone clattering loudly to the floor behind me. I heard it shatter, a sharp, final sound, plunging the room into absolute darkness. I made it to the living room, my mind racing, a frantic storm of desperate plans. The front door was just a few feet away, a beacon of hope. If I could just get out, call for help, summon anyone to my aid. But I never made it. Something hit me from behind, a brutal, jarring impact, sending me sprawling violently onto the floor. The impact knocked the wind clean out of me, a searing pain. And before I could even begin to recover, I felt those claw-like hands, cold and rough, on my shoulders, flipping me over. The man-creature, whatever unspeakable horror it truly was, loomed over me, a grotesque shadow in the darkness. Up close, in the faint ambient light, I could clearly see that his teeth were filed to sharp, unsettling points, like a predator's. He grinned down at me, a wide, terrifying rictus, and a wave of pure, unadulterated terror washed over me, a suffocating tsunami of dread. "Shoo," he whispered, his voice raspy, a dry, grating sound from long disuse. Almost like sandpaper. "I've been waiting so long to meet you." I opened my mouth to scream again, to unleash the primal sound of my terror, but he clamped one of those terrible, clawed hands firmly over my face, cutting off the sound. The smell of him was overwhelming, a cloying, fetid stench, and I felt myself starting to black out, the world spinning, blurring at the edges. The last thing I remember before losing consciousness was his voice, a chilling whisper, insidious and profound, in my ear, "We're going to have so much fun together." When I finally came to, a slow, disorienting return to awareness, I was no longer in my apartment. The air was damp and cool, a chilling caress, and I could hear the rhythmic drip of water somewhere nearby, a maddening, persistent sound. I tried to move, to flex my limbs, but found my hands and feet were bound tightly, meticulously secured. As my eyes slowly adjusted to the dim, oppressive light, a horrifying realization dawned. I was in some kind of underground chamber. The walls were rough, uneven stone, cold and unyielding, and the only illumination came from a few flickering, ghostly candles placed strategically around the damp room. I wasn't alone. There were others, at least 3 that I could discern in the gloom, similarly bound, silent prisoners. They looked at me with a profound mixture of pity and resignation, their eyes hollow, defeated. One, a woman who might have been in her 30s, shook her head slightly when she saw me looking at her, a silent message, "Don't bother trying to escape." I heard movement from the shadows, a subtle shift. And then he appeared, the creature from my closet. In this stark, revealing light, he looked even less human, more grotesque, his true nature laid bare. His movements were jerky and unnatural, almost marionette-like, as if he were a puppet with tangled, poorly manipulated strings. "Oh, you're awake," he said, that terrible, unsettling grin spreading across his face again, a grotesque distortion. "Good. It's no fun when they sleep through everything." I tried to speak, to demand answers, to scream, but my mouth was so dry, so parched with terror, no words would come out. He seemed to understand, though, reading the silent terror in my eyes. "You're wondering why you're here, why I chose you." He crouched down next to me, his face unnervingly close to mine, his eyes wild and fixed. "I've been watching you for a long time. All of you. Waiting for the perfect moment." He stood up again, beginning to pace the small, confined room, his long, wicked claws clicking audibly against the rough stone floor. "You see, I need you. Your fear, your pain. It sustains me, keeps me young." He gestured vaguely to the other captives, silent, defeated figures slumped against the stone. "They've all contributed, but it's never enough. I always need more." As he spoke, a chilling, unsettling transformation began to occur. His appearance seemed to subtly shift, to change. The more he talked, the less monstrous he looked, the more human his features became. His pale, waxy skin took on a healthier, more vibrant color, his emaciated frame slowly filled out, gaining substance. Even his hands, once grotesquely clawed, were subtly changing, the fearsome talons gradually receding, drawing back into normal-looking fingernails. With growing horror, a dawning, sickening realization, I understood what he was saying was literally, terrifyingly true. He was feeding off our fear, our suffering. It was physically transforming him, consuming our essence to bolster his own. What are you?" I managed to croak out, my voice raw, barely a whisper. He paused in his pacing, turning slowly to look at me with those wild, unblinking eyes. "I've had many names over the centuries," he rasped, his voice ancient, carrying the weight of untold ages. "Vampire, Wendigo, Boogeyman. But names don't really matter, do they? What matters is what I can do." He knelt down beside me again, unsettlingly close, running one of those terrible, now almost normal-looking hands through my hair, a grotesque parody of a gentle caress. "And what I can do, my dear, is live forever, as long as I have souls like yours to feed on." I squeezed my eyes shut, desperate to will this entire nightmare away, to escape its horrifying grip. This couldn't be real. Monsters like this didn't exist, not in the rational, modern world. Any moment now, I'd surely wake up in my own bed, and this would all have been nothing more than a terrible, vivid nightmare. But when I opened my eyes, a profound sense of despair washing over me, I was still there. Still bound in that damp, cold underground chamber. Still utterly at the mercy of this creature that defied all explanation, all logic. He must have seen the utter despair in my eyes because he laughed. It was a horrible, grating sound. Like rocks grinding together, a sound devoid of mirth, filled only with triumph. Oh, don't look so sad. You should be honored. Your fear, your suffering, it will become part of me. In a way, you'll live forever too. With that chilling pronouncement, he stood and moved to one of the other captives, a young man who couldn't have been more than 20, his face a mask of resigned terror. What happened next, I can barely bring myself to describe, even in the darkest corners of my memory. The screams echoed off the rough, unforgiving stone walls, mixing grotesquely with the creature's low, triumphant laughter, a chilling symphony of horror. I don't know how long I was trapped in that subterranean hell. Time lost all meaning, utterly irrelevant. Day and night blurred together in an endless, agonizing cycle of raw terror and unimaginable pain. I watched, helpless, as one by one, the other captives were consumed. Consumed is the only word I can possibly think of to describe the horrifying process. Their fear, their very essence, absorbed by this monster, fueling his horrifying transformation. And all the while, he changed. With each new victim, he became more human in appearance, a chilling metamorphosis. By the time he finally turned his attention fully to me, his eyes now unsettlingly clear, his face no longer gaunt, he could have easily passed for a normal man on the street, unremarkable, unassuming. I'd like to say I was brave in the face of what I knew was undeniably coming, that I defied him to the bitter end, screaming curses, fighting with every last fiber of my being. But the truth is, I was utterly broken. When he finally approached me, that familiar, terrible grin now gracing his handsome, human-like face, I didn't fight. I didn't scream. I just closed my eyes and waited with a profound, weary resignation for it to finally be over. But something strange, something miraculous happened, just as I felt his cold hands on me. A sudden commotion erupted from above, shouts, distant yet distinct, and the unmistakable sound of splintering wood. The creature's head snapped up, his eyes wide with an emotion I hadn't seen from him before, raw, unadulterated fear. What happened next is a blur in my shattered memory. There were people in uniforms, their movements swift and decisive, bright, blinding lights, and loud, authoritative voices. I remember being carefully carried out of that underground hell, the damp, suffocating darkness giving way to sunlight for the first time in what felt like years, its warmth a shock to my skin. I later learned that a neighbor, concerned by strange, muffled noises emanating from my apartment on the night I was taken, had finally called the police. It had taken them weeks, long, grueling weeks, to meticulously track us down, following a cold, faint trail of similar, unexplained disappearances across the entire country. They never found the creature. In the chaos of the raid, he had somehow, impossibly, slipped away, a ghost in the night. The police assured me with practiced words that he couldn't have gotten far, that they would find him, that he was a tangible threat. But I knew better. He had been doing this for centuries. He would simply go to ground, vanish into the shadows, wait patiently until the hunt died down, until the memory faded. And then he would begin again. Sometimes late at night, in the profound silence of my new, seemingly safe apartment, I still hear that chilling, scratching sound, a phantom echo. I know intellectually that it's just my imagination, my traumatized mind playing cruel, persistent tricks on me. But I can't help but wonder, is he out there, watching, waiting for the perfect, most excruciating moment to strike again? And I realized, with a cold, terrifying certainty, that in a strange, horrifying way he was right. A part of me will live forever, an indelible mark on my soul. The part that will always be looking over my shoulder, always listening, acutely, for that telltale, chilling scratch in the deepest, most terrifying silence of the night. Because I know the truth now. Monsters are real, and sometimes horrifyingly. They look just like us. Story 10. The moment I stumbled upon that hidden compound in the deepest part of the forest, a sickening certainty washed over me. I knew, with a primal dread, that I had unearthed something I was never, ever meant to see. The air grew thick with tension, a suffocating weight, and a profound chill slithered down my spine as the terrifying realization struck me. My life was about to irrevocably change forever, if I even managed to survive the next few harrowing hours. I've always been an avid hiker, my solace found in the embrace of the wild, spending most of my weekends meticulously exploring the vast, untamed wilderness near my remote home. This particular Saturday began like countless others before it. I packed my usual, well-worn gear, water bottles clanking faintly, energy bars tucked securely, a compact first aid kit, a small, indispensable knife, and set out at dawn, eager, almost giddy, to tackle a new trail I'd recently unearthed on a faded, antique map. The trail itself proved more treacherous, more overgrown than I had anticipated, barely discernible in some stretches, a faint whisper of a path, but I pressed on, relishing the challenge, the profound sense of being truly, delightfully off the beaten path. It was nearing midday when the chilling realization struck me. I had irrevocably strayed from the designated trail altogether. I wasn't particularly worried. Not at first. I had my trusty compass, its needle a silent guide, and a clear sense of the general direction back to my car, so I decided, on a whim born of curiosity, to press on a bit further before turning back, eager to see what hidden wonders, what unforeseen landscapes, lay beyond the next ridge. That's when I saw it. First, it was just a faint glint of metal through the dense, obscuring trees, so utterly out of place in the ancient, untouched forest that I initially convinced myself it must be a trick of the light, a fleeting illusion. But as I moved closer, carefully ducking under low-hanging branches and pushing through thick, resistant underbrush, the horrifying truth dawned with chilling clarity. I wasn't imagining things. Nestled in a small, concealed valley below was a compound. High metal fences, topped with menacing barbed wire, meticulously encircled a cluster of nondescript, low-slung buildings. The structures themselves were uniformly gray, stark, and utilitarian, with remarkably few windows, almost bunker-like. They could have been warehouses or perhaps grim barracks, but something about their starkness screamed secrecy. What truly struck me, what sent a cold shiver down my spine, was how unervingly new everything looked. This wasn't some long-abandoned military installation, a forgotten relic of a bygone era, nor a crumbling, overgrown research station. This place was undeniably active, humming with a suppressed energy and clearly, unequivocally, not meant to be found. I instinctively crouched low behind a large, gnarled fallen tree, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a trapped bird, as I desperately tried to make sense of the impossible tableau unfolding before me. There were people moving around inside the compound, distant figures dressed in what appeared to be some form of uniform, but I was too far away, too obscured to make out any distinguishing details. I fumbled instinctively for my phone, a desperate, futile gesture, thinking I should capture a picture, document this impossible discovery. But of course, there was no signal this deep in the secluded woods. That's when I heard it. The unmistakable, chilling sound of a twig snapping sharply behind me. I whirled around, my breath catching in my throat, freezing there, suspended in terror. And there, not 10 feet away, stood a man in full camouflage, his face grim, a rifle held steadily, ominously, pointed directly at my chest. "Don't move," he commanded, his voice low and utterly steady, devoid of inflection. "Hands where I can see them." I raised my hands slowly, meticulously, my mind racing, a frantic storm of questions. Who were these people? What was this clandestine place? And, more pressingly, what unspeakable fate did they have in store for me? The man spoke crisply into a radio clipped to his shoulder, its static-laced words cutting through the sudden silence. "Base, this is Patrol 2. We have an intruder at the north perimeter. Bringing him in." My stomach plummeted, a nauseating drop, at those chilling words. Bringing him in. This was bad. Very, very bad. Stand up slowly, the man ordered, his voice cold, devoid of compromise. I complied, my legs shaky beneath me, threatening to give way. Now walk, and don't try anything stupid. He marched me inexorably down the slight hill towards the menacing cluster of buildings. As we drew closer, more chilling details became apparent. The fence, a formidable barrier, stood at least 15 feet high, its metal glinting menacingly, topped with multiple strands of razor wire. Cameras, small, unblinking eyes, were strategically placed at regular intervals, silently observing. A heavy metal gate slid open with a low, hydraulic hum as we approached, and two more armed men, grim-faced and watchful, emerged to meet us. "Where did you find him?" One of them, a burly figure, demanded of my captor. "Up on the ridge," he replied, his voice flat. He was watching the compound. The two newcomers exchanged a quick, knowing look, a silent communication that sent a fresh wave of ice-cold dread through my veins, making my blood run cold. Without another word, they roughly grabbed my arms, their grips like vices, and steered me, inexorably, into the compound. The inside was a bewildering flurry of frantic, controlled activity. People in white lab coats, their faces tense, rushed purposefully between buildings, clutching overflowing folders and carrying strange, gleaming equipment. Armed guards, grim and alert, patrolled the perimeter with a silent vigilance, their weapons glinting. And everywhere, pervading the very air, was an intense sense of urgency, a desperate, palpable energy, as if everyone was working frantically against some unseen, inexorable clock. I was led, unceremoniously, to one of the larger, more imposing buildings and pushed inside. The interior was stark and clinical, reminiscent of a hospital operating room, but with an underlying, pervasive sense of cold menace and unspoken threat hanging heavy in the sterile air. They brought me to a small, windowless room, its walls bare, and ordered me with a curt gesture to sit in a metal chair, its legs bolted immovably to the cold concrete floor. For what felt like an eternity, hours stretching into an unbearable eternity, I sat there alone, utterly isolated, my mind conjuring up an increasingly terrifying, grotesque array of scenarios. Were they going to kill me? Imprison me indefinitely? What was this place, and what unspeakable, horrifying experiments were they conducting here that demanded such profound secrecy? Such extreme measures? Finally, mercifully, the door opened. A woman entered, her sharp, intelligent features accentuated by her severely pulled back, almost painfully tight hair. She sat abruptly across from me, placing a thin, sterile folder on the table between us with a soft thud. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice clipped, utterly businesslike, devoid of any warmth. "And what are you doing here?" I explained my story, a meticulously rehearsed narrative. How I'd embarked on a casual hike, how I'd gotten hopelessly lost, and how I had, purely by accident, stumbled upon the remote compound. As I spoke, her eyes, sharp and intelligent, watched me with an unnerving, unsettling intensity, as if she were attempting to peer directly into my very thoughts, to read the hidden truths in my mind. When I finished, she was silent for a long, agonizing moment, her gaze unblinking, assessing. Then she opened the folder and, with a deliberate slowness that heightened my terror, pulled out a photograph. It was me, clear and undeniable, on the ridge, taken just moments before I was captured. "You understand," she stated, her voice flat, devoid of emotion, "that this puts us in a very difficult position. You've seen things you were never meant to see." I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly constricted. "Dry as desert dust. I don't know what this place is," I whispered, my voice barely audible, "and honestly, I don't want to know. If you just let me go, I swear I won't tell anyone about this. I'll forget I ever saw anything." She smiled then, a thin, humorless curve of her lips that could not reach her cold, calculating eyes. "I'm afraid it's not that simple," she stated, her voice chillingly precise. "You see, what we're doing here, it's bigger than you can imagine. Bigger than all of us. We can't risk exposure. Not when we're so close." "Close to what?" The words, a desperate plea for understanding, were out of my mouth before I could even stop them. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "That's not your concern," she snapped, her voice sharp, dismissive. "What you need to concern yourself with now is cooperation. The more you cooperate, the easier this will be for you." With that chilling pronouncement, she turned and left, leaving me utterly alone with my rapidly escalating fear and profound, terrifying confusion. Over the next few days, at least, I think it was days, it was almost impossible to keep accurate track of time in that windowless, sterile room. I was subjected to repeated, relentless questioning. They demanded to know everything about me. My mundane job, the intricate details of my family, the names and habits of my friends. They were particularly unnervingly interested in whether I had confided in anyone about my hiking plans before setting out. In between these grueling interrogations, I caught fleeting glimpses, overheard chilling snippets of conversation that only deepened the profound mystery surrounding the compound. I heard hushed mentions of the subject and, unsettlingly, the breakthrough. Once, through a narrow, accidental gap in a door, I saw a frantic group of scientists rushing a covered gurney between buildings, and from beneath the sheet, an unearthly, inhuman scream, raw and terrifying, tore through the air. On what I believe was the third day of my horrifying captivity, everything abruptly changed. I was jolted awake in the middle of the night by the deafening blare of alarms, harsh, mechanical wails that sliced through the oppressive silence like a knife. For a fleeting moment, I felt a surge of irrational elation, sound, action, perhaps even rescue. But then I heard something else, something far more sinister, screams, distant at first, but rapidly growing closer. And underneath the screams, another sound, a low, guttural growl that raised the hair on the back of my neck, freezing it there. The door handle to my room began to rattle violently, a frantic, desperate sound. Something was trying desperately to get in. No, not something. Someone. I could hear them now, their labored breathing, the frantic pounding of their fists against the sturdy wood. "Let me in," a voice cried, hoarse with raw fear. "Please. They're coming." I stood frozen, utterly paralyzed, torn irrevocably between the primal instinct to help, to open the door and offer solace, and the stark, chilling warnings that had been brutally drilled into me over the past agonizing days. The pounding on the door grew more frantic, more desperate. "Please. I can see you in there. Let me in." How could they see me? I hadn't moved near the door, hadn't made a sound. A profound chill, cold and sharp, ran down my spine as the terrifying implications solidified. Whatever was out there, it wasn't human. Not anymore. The pounding stopped abruptly. A sudden, chilling silence. It was replaced by a wet, tearing sound, a sickening, visceral noise, and a scream that cut off abruptly mid-cry. Then profound silence again, but not the same silence as before. This was the terrifying, suffocating silence of a predator utterly still, meticulously stalking its prey. I backed slowly away from the door, my heart pounding so violently, so loudly. I was sure whatever terrifying entity was out there must be able to hear its frantic rhythm. I retreated, desperately, to the small, sterile bathroom, locking the flimsy door behind me, knowing, with a sinking dread, that it would provide little, if any, real protection if something truly wanted to get in. Hours passed, stretching into an eternity. The alarms eventually silenced, their blare replaced by an even more oppressive, terrifying silence. I strained my ears, every nerve attuned, desperately listening for any sound, any subtle clue as to what was transpiring outside. Beyond the confines of my small, windowless prison, Just when I thought I couldn't endure the agonizing suspense any longer, I heard it. Footsteps. In the hallway again, but different this time. Measured. Deliberate. They stopped. Right outside my door. "Hello?" A calm, authoritative voice called out. "We're here to evacuate the building. If you can hear me, please respond." I wanted to cry out, to rush to the door, to throw myself into the arms of salvation. But a persistent, nagging doubt, a cold, insidious whisper nagged at me. What if it was a trick? What if opening that door, that portal, meant certain death? "This is your last chance," the voice stated, firm and unyielding. "We're leaving in 5 minutes. If you can hear this, knock 3 times on the door." I stood, my legs shaking uncontrollably, trembling with fear and indecision. This was it, the moment of truth. Stay and face an uncertain, terrifying fate. Utterly alone in the small, silent room. Or risk everything, gamble my very existence on the fragile hope that salvation truly waited on the other side of that wooden barrier. As I raised my trembling hand, poised to knock, a chilling, profound thought struck me, a sudden, terrifying epiphany. In all the endless days I'd been trapped here, through all the suffocating silence and profound isolation, I had never once, not even for a fleeting moment, questioned why I had been chosen to be saved, singled out from the others. What, precisely, made me so special? And, more importantly, what terrifying price would I ultimately have to pay for that elusive salvation? My knuckles hovered, inches from the cold, unyielding door. As the seconds ticked by, each one an eternity. 3 knocks. 3 simple knocks stood between me and whatever terrifying destiny awaited on the other side. 3 knocks to either save my life, to grant me a reprieve, or to end it, to seal my fate in the most brutal way imaginable. As I steeled myself, gathering every last shred of my courage to make my life-altering choice, I realized, with a chilling clarity, that the real test wasn't simply surviving this claustrophobic room. The real test, the true, profound challenge, was what I would do, what kind of person I would become, once I finally left it. Story 11. The first thing I noticed when I regained consciousness was the silence. Not the peaceful, comforting quiet of a lazy Sunday morning, but an oppressive, suffocating absence of sound that made my skin crawl, a chilling weight on the air. As my eyes slowly adjusted to the dim, ambient light, a cold wave of panic began its relentless climb. This wasn't my bedroom. I had no idea where I was, no memory of how I'd gotten there. But the note, stark and undeniable, taped to the door made one thing terrifyingly clear. If I wanted to survive, I couldn't leave this room. My head throbbed with a dull, persistent ache, and my mouth felt like it was stuffed with cotton, dry and parched. I tried desperately to piece together my last coherent memories. I'd been at a vibrant bar, celebrating a hard-earned promotion with a lively group of colleagues. There had been drinks, lots of them, a joyous blur of clinking glasses and laughter. Someone, I vaguely recalled, had suggested moving the party to a thumping club after. After that, everything was an impenetrable, frightening blur. I sat up slowly, cautiously, fighting a powerful wave of nausea that threatened to overwhelm me. I was lying on a bare mattress, its springs creaking faintly in what appeared to be a small, sparsely furnished studio apartment. There was a basic kitchenette nestled awkwardly in one corner, a door that presumably led to a bathroom, and the main door, the one with the ominous handwritten note. The windows, I observed with a sinking heart, were crudely boarded up from the outside, allowing only slivers of weak, diffuse light to penetrate the pervasive gloom, casting the room in perpetual twilight. Stumbling unsteadily to my feet, my muscles protesting, I made my way, a reluctant prisoner, to the main door. The note was handwritten, the letters jagged and rushed as if scrawled in haste or desperation. "Don't try to leave. Stay inside if you want to live." I stared at those words, my gaze tracing each unsettling curve. Reading them over and over, desperately trying to make some semblance of sense of their chilling implication. Was this some kind of sick joke? A cruel, elaborate prank gone horribly terrifyingly awry? I gripped the door handle, twisting it frantically. Locked, of course. I pounded on the solid wood, shouting for help, my voice hoarse and desperate, but the thick, unyielding material seemed to swallow my cries, muffling them into silence. After what felt like an eternity, but was likely only minutes, my voice raw and my hands bruised from futile effort, I finally gave up. The bathroom door, mercifully, was unlocked. I splashed cold water on my face, the sudden shock helping to clear the thick fog from my head, to sharpen my dulled senses. As I looked into the dim, streaked mirror, something caught my eye, something that made my blood run cold, freezing in my veins. A small, distinct puncture mark on my neck, surrounded by a faint, purplish bruise. I'd been injected with something. That terrifying realization sent a fresh, powerful wave of panic surging through me, cold and relentless. I tore frantically through the small apartment, a desperate, wild search for my phone, my wallet, anything, any small object that might help me piece together what was happening, or, more importantly, call for help, for rescue. But all my belongings were inexplicably gone. The kitchenette, surprisingly, was stocked with an ample supply of non-perishable food items and bottled water, enough, it seemed, to last for weeks if I rationed it carefully, meticulously. The cupboards also contained basic medical supplies, neatly organized, and some plain clothes that looked like they would fit me. Whoever had put me here, whoever had engineered this terrifying abduction, had planned meticulously, preparing for a long, indefinite stay. As the initial crushing shock slowly began to wear off, my mind, despite the terror, raced with 1,000 unanswered questions. Who had done this to me? Why me specifically? And what unspeakable horror lay beyond that door, so dangerous, so terrifying, that I had to be explicitly warned not to leave? I spent that first agonizing day alternating between frantic attempts to find a way out, meticulously examining every inch of the room, and straining my ears, every nerve attuned for any sound, any faint whisper from the outside world. But the silence remained absolute, unbroken, a suffocating presence. And every potential escape route I discovered, every desperate plan I formulated, led only to a dead end. The windows were not only boarded but appeared to be bricked up solid behind the rough planks. The air vents were far too small, impossibly narrow, for even a child to crawl through. I was well and truly trapped, a prisoner in a bizarre, unsettling cage. Night fell, or at least, I assumed it did. It was almost impossible to tell the passage of time with no view of the outside world, no sun or moon to mark the hours. I couldn't sleep, my mind racing, consumed by a pervasive terror. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined someone or something silently creeping into the room, a shadowy presence. Instead, I sat rigidly, my back pressed against the cold, unyielding wall, my gaze fixed on the ominous door, waiting, my heart thudding. The next few days blurred into a haze of pervasive fear and profound confusion. I desperately tried to keep track of time, to impose some semblance of order on the chaos, but with no sunlight, no clocks, the hours dissolved into an indistinguishable, agonizing continuum. I meticulously rationed the food and water, stretching every portion, knowing with a cold certainty that I had no idea how long I would need it to last. I exercised, desperately, compulsively, to keep my mind occupied, to ward off the encroaching madness, pacing the small space until I had memorized every single crack, every minute imperfection in the featureless walls. On what I thought was the fourth day, a sudden, jarring sound pierced the oppressive silence. A sound from outside. Faint at first, almost imperceptible, but steadily growing louder. Footsteps. My heart raced, a frantic drum, as they approached the door. Then a soft thud as something heavy was placed just outside. The footsteps retreated, fading into silence. I waited, barely breathing, for what felt like an eternity, hours stretching into an unbearable stillness, before I dared to approach the door. There was no mail slot, no peephole, no way to see what had been left. or who had left it. But now, taped securely to the door, was a new note, stark and chilling: food and water outside. Wait 30 minutes after delivery before opening door. Close immediately. Do not attempt to leave or make contact. My hands shook uncontrollably as I read the terse, chilling instructions. This was my chance. I could open the door. Perhaps catch a fleeting glimpse of who had imprisoned me here, find some way, any way, to escape this nightmare. But the chilling warning from the first note echoed in my mind, a cold, insistent whisper: stay inside if you want to live. I waited, forcing myself to comply, counting the excruciating seconds, my mind a battlefield of warring impulses. When 30 minutes had finally agonizingly passed, I took a deep, fortifying breath and slowly, deliberately turned the handle. It was unlocked. I opened the door just a crack, peering cautiously out into a dimly lit hallway, its shadows long and deep. There was a cardboard box on the floor, filled with more non-perishable food and bottled water. A mundane offering in a terrifying context. But what truly caught my eye, what froze me in place, was the wall directly opposite my door. It was utterly covered in newspaper clippings and blurred photographs, a horrifying, chaotic mosaic. In the brief, terrifying moment before I lost my nerve and slammed the door shut, one headline, stark and terrifying, burned itself irrevocably into my brain. Outbreak spreads, major cities quarantined. My mind reeled. Outbreak? Quarantine? Was that why I was locked in here, imprisoned? But why me? Why like this? The food and water lasted another week, each passing day an excruciating descent into deeper isolation. Each agonizing hour, I became more desperate for information. For human contact, for anything to break the maddening, relentless silence and profound isolation. I started talking to myself, my voice a hollow echo in the small room, carrying on frantic, one-sided conversations with imaginary companions, just to hear a human voice, any voice. Then, on what I desperately hoped was the 10th day, or perhaps the 11th, everything irrevocably changed. I woke abruptly to the deafening, insistent blare of alarms, harsh, mechanical wails that sliced through the oppressive silence like a knife, tearing it apart. For a fleeting moment, a desperate, irrational surge of elation seized me. Sound, action, movement. Maybe, just maybe, rescue was finally at hand. But then I heard something else, something far more terrifying. Screams. Distant at first, muffled, but rapidly growing closer, more distinct. And underneath the screams, another sound, a low, guttural growl that raised the hair on the back of my neck, freezing it there, making my skin crawl. The door handle to my room began to rattle violently. A frantic, desperate attempt. Something was trying, desperately, to get in. No, not something. Someone. I could hear them now, their labored, ragged breathing, the desperate, frantic pounding of their fists against the sturdy wood. Let me in, a voice cried, hoarse with raw, unadulterated fear. Please. They're coming. I stood frozen, utterly paralyzed, torn irrevocably between the primal instinct to help, to open the door and offer solace, and the stark, chilling warnings that had been brutally drilled into me over the past agonizing days. The pounding on the door grew more frantic, more desperate, more insistent. Please. I can see you in there. Let me in. How could they see me? I hadn't moved near the door, hadn't made a sound, hadn't exposed myself. A profound chill, cold and sharp, ran down my spine as the terrifying implications solidified. Whatever was out there, it wasn't human. Not anymore. The pounding stopped abruptly. A sudden, chilling silence. It was replaced by a wet, tearing sound, a sickening, visceral noise, and a scream that cut off abruptly, mid-cry, a horrifying, final sound. Then profound silence again. But not the same silence as before. This was the terrifying, suffocating silence of a predator, utterly still, meticulously stalking its prey. A silent, deadly promise. I backed slowly away from the door, my heart pounding so violently, so loudly, I was sure whatever terrifying entity was out there must be able to hear its frantic rhythm. I retreated, desperately, to the small, sterile bathroom, locking the flimsy door behind me, knowing with a sinking dread that it would provide little, if any, real protection if something truly wanted to get in. Hours passed, stretching into an eternity. The alarms eventually silenced, their blare replaced by an even more oppressive, terrifying silence. I strained my ears, every nerve attuned, desperately listening for any sound, any subtle clue as to what was transpiring outside, beyond the confines of my small, windowless prison. Just when I thought I couldn't endure the agonizing suspense any longer, I heard it. Footsteps, in the hallway again, but different this time. Measured, deliberate. They stopped, right outside my door. "Hello?" a calm, authoritative voice called out. "We're here to evacuate the building. If you can hear me, please respond." I wanted to cry out, to rush to the door, to throw myself into the arms of salvation. But a persistent, nagging doubt, a cold, insidious whisper nagged at me. What if it was a trick? What if opening that door, that portal, meant certain death? "This is your last chance," the voice stated, firm and unyielding. "We're leaving in 5 minutes. If you can hear this, knock 3 times on the door." I stood, my legs shaking uncontrollably, trembling with fear and indecision. This was it, the moment of truth. Stay and face an uncertain, terrifying fate, utterly alone in this small, silent room, or risk everything, gamble my very existence, on the fragile hope that salvation truly waited on the other side of that wooden barrier. As I raised my trembling hand, poised to knock, a chilling, profound thought struck me, a sudden, terrifying epiphany. In all the endless days I'd been trapped here, through all the suffocating silence and profound isolation, I had never once, not even for a fleeting moment, questioned why I had been chosen to be saved, singled out from the others. What, precisely, made me so special? And, more importantly, what terrifying price would I ultimately have to pay for that elusive salvation? My knuckles hovered, inches from the cold, unyielding door. As the seconds ticked by, each one an eternity. 3 knocks. 3 simple knocks stood between me and whatever terrifying destiny awaited on the other side. 3 knocks to either save my life, to grant me a reprieve, or to end it, to seal my fate in the most brutal way imaginable. As I steeled myself, gathering every last shred of my courage, to make my life-altering choice, I realized, with a chilling clarity, that the real test wasn't simply surviving this claustrophobic room. The real test, the true, profound challenge, was what I would do, what kind of person I would become, once I finally left it. Story 12. The smell hit me first, a sickly sweet odor that clung to the back of my throat and made my stomach churn, a taste of profound decay. As I stood in Mr. Peterson's living room, surrounded by teetering stacks of old newspapers and a graveyard of unwashed dishes, I knew, with a chilling certainty, that something was terribly, fundamentally wrong. My elderly neighbor hadn't been seen in days, a quiet absence that had grown increasingly loud. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for the quiet horror I was about to uncover. I'd lived next door to Mr. Peterson for nearly 5 years. He was a quiet man, a creature of habit who largely kept to himself. But he always offered a kind word and a gentle wave when our paths crossed. He was the quintessential neighbor you'd expect in a small town like ours, unobtrusive, a comforting background presence, yet reliably there. If his lawn grew a bit shaggy, or his mailbox began to overflow with neglected circulars, someone would invariably notice, and someone would always quietly check in on him. That's precisely why his sudden, uncharacteristic absence felt so profoundly unsettling. It started on a Tuesday. I was leaving for work and noticed his morning newspaper still resting, untouched, on his driveway. Odd, I thought, but perhaps he'd simply slept in, a rare indulgence. By Thursday, there were 3 papers piled up, a silent testament to his continued absence. And his car hadn't moved from its usual spot in the driveway. I knocked on his door that evening, a tentative rapping, but there was no answer. The curtains were drawn, thick and opaque, obscuring any view inside, and I couldn't discern any movement from within. A sick, cold feeling began to coil in the pit of my stomach. Mr. Peterson was in his late 80s. What if he'd fallen and couldn't reach the phone? I debated, fiercely, calling the police, but I didn't want to overreact to unnecessarily alarm anyone. Perhaps I rationalized. He'd simply gone to visit family, a spontaneous trip, and had forgotten to inform anyone. It happens sometimes, especially with older folks. Instead, I decided to use the spare key he'd entrusted to me for emergencies, a gesture of quiet trust, and check on him myself. The lock turned easily with a soft click, but the heavy door stuck stubbornly as I tried to open it. I had to put my shoulder into it, exerting my full weight, and when it finally yielded, giving way with a reluctant groan, I nearly gagged. The smell that wafted out was overwhelming, a suffocating assault on my senses, a putrid mixture of rotting food, unwashed bodies, and something else. Something cloyingly sweet and metallic I couldn't quite place, but that sent deep shivers down my spine, a visceral recognition of wrongness. "Mr. Peterson?" I called out, my voice sounding small and afraid in the stuffy, silent gloom of the house. "It's Clara from next door. Are you all right?" No answer. I stepped further into the house, my eyes watering from the noxious stench, a grim welcome. The living room was a chaotic mess, a scene of profound disarray, utterly unlike anything I'd ever seen in Mr. Peterson's usually meticulously tidy home. Newspapers, yellowed and brittle with age, were stacked haphazardly, precariously, on every conceivable surface. Dirty plates and half-empty cups littered the coffee table and the floor, forming a grim, domestic still life of neglect. But it was the walls that truly commanded my attention, drawing my gaze with an irresistible, terrifying pull. They were covered in writing, frantic, desperate messages scrawled in what appeared to be vivid red marker. As I got closer, the full horror solidified and my blood ran cold. The writing was erratic, almost frenzied, the letters sprawling and disjointed, and the messages themselves were profoundly disturbing. "They're watching. Can't trust anyone. The signals are getting stronger." I pulled out my phone, my hands trembling violently, already dialing 911, when I heard a faint noise from upstairs. A soft thud, like something heavy falling over, a muffled echo in the oppressive silence. "Mr. Peterson?" I called out again, louder this time, my voice laced with a desperate hope. "Is that you?" Silence. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, to flee this house, to get out and call the police from a safe distance. But what if Mr. Peterson was truly hurt? What if he desperately needed help right now? With shaking legs, leaden and reluctant, I made my way up the creaking stairs. The putrid smell intensified with each ascending step, and I had to breathe through my mouth, shallow gasps, to keep from retching. At the top of the stairs, I saw that the door to Mr. Peterson's bedroom was ajar, a faint, sickly light spilling out into the darkened hallway. "Mr. Peterson," I said, pushing the door open slowly, hesitantly. "I'm coming in, okay?" The bedroom was even worse than downstairs, a horrifying testament to his spiraling descent. The walls were completely covered in the same frantic, disjointed writing, but here it wasn't just marker. Some of it looked as though it had been violently scratched into the wallpaper with bare fingernails, deep, desperate gouges. And there, in the unsettling center of the room, was Mr. Peterson himself. He was sitting slumped in an old, threadbare armchair, facing away from me, his back to the door. I could see the top of his balding head, a pale, vulnerable curve, above the worn back of the chair. "Mr. Peterson," my voice was barely a whisper now, strained with dawning dread. "Are you all right?" I took a tentative step closer, my heart pounding, a frantic drum in my ears. And that's when I saw it. A dark, spreading stain on the worn carpet, blooming outward from beneath the chair, a macabre Rorschach test. My mind, desperate to cling to normalcy, fiercely resisted processing what I was seeing, but I knew. Oh God, I knew. I circled slowly, reluctantly, around to the front of the armchair, every muscle tense, my breath caught in my throat. Mr. Peterson's eyes were wide open, staring blankly, unseeing, at the stained ceiling, fixed on some unseen horror. In his lap, clutched tightly in his hand, was a small, worn notebook, open to a page filled with more of the frenzied, illegible writing. And in his other hand, gripped so tightly his knuckles were white, a kitchen knife. I stumbled backward. A strangled scream caught in my throat, a sound that wouldn't escape. This couldn't be happening. Mr. Peterson was the sweetest old man, a gentle soul. He baked delicious cookies for all the neighborhood kids and meticulously fed the stray cats that wandered through his yard. He wouldn't have. But the undeniable, brutal evidence was right there, stark and horrifying, staring me in the face. Mr. Peterson had taken his own life, surrounded by the terrifying ravings of a mind that had clearly, irrevocably, slipped into paranoia and profound delusion. With trembling hands, shaking so violently I almost dropped the phone, I finally managed to dial 911. As I waited for the sirens to wail, for the comforting presence of the police to arrive, I couldn't help but look around the room, frantically trying to make sense of the chaos, to find some logic in the madness. The writing on the wall seemed to be a grotesque amalgamation of disparate elements, wild, baseless conspiracy theories mixed with intensely personal paranoia. There were fervent references to shadowy government mind control programs, to insidious alien invasions, to powerful, unseen organizations meticulously watching his every move. But interspersed with these grand, fantastical delusions were far more personal, chilling messages. Clara next door is one of them. Can't trust the mailman. He's bringing their signals. The TV is how they get into your head. Seeing my own name, Clara, scrawled in that frantic hand, sent an immediate, icy shock through me, a fresh wave of terror. How long had Mr. Peterson been suspicious of me? Had he been watching me, observing my every move, convinced I was an unwitting participant in some sinister, all-encompassing plot? The police arrived, their sudden presence filling the house with noise and activity that felt utterly surreal, a jarring cacophony after the oppressive, suffocating silence. I gave my statement in a daze, my words feeling distant, detached, watching as they meticulously photographed the grim scene and carefully bagged evidence, their movements efficient, practiced. It wasn't until much later, after I'd been thoroughly questioned and finally sent home, released into the comforting anonymity of my own space, that the full, crushing impact of what I'd witnessed truly hit me. I sat numbly on my couch, staring blankly at the wall that silently separated my house from Mr. Peterson's, and I finally broke down, the tears flowing freely, uncontrollably. How had I not noticed? How had none of us, his neighbors, his community, seen that Mr. Peterson was struggling so desperately, silently battling such profound demons? There must have been signs, subtle shifts, changes in his behavior or appearance that we had all tragically missed, or perhaps, more accurately, casually dismissed as the eccentricities of old age. The next few weeks were a blur of intense police investigations and hushed, respectful neighborhood gossip. Mr. Peterson, tragically, had no known family, so the grim task of cleaning out his house fell to the county, a bureaucratic duty. I watched, a silent observer from my window, as workers in stark hazmat suits moved in and out, carrying boxes and old furniture, dismantling a life, erasing a nightmare. One day, as I was routinely bringing in my mail, one of the workers, a burly man with tired eyes, approached me. He held out a sealed envelope, its presence a stark surprise. "We found this in the house," he said, his voice quiet, almost reverent. "It's addressed to you." With shaking hands, a tremor of apprehension, I took the envelope. My name, Clara, was written on it in Mr. Peterson's familiar, wavering scrawl. I waited until the worker had disappeared from sight before slowly, reluctantly opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper covered from top to bottom in the same frantic, disjointed writing I'd seen plastered across the walls of his house. But this message was different. This message was addressed to me. Clara, it began, the words stark and chilling. If you're reading this, then they got to me. I'm sorry for what you must have seen. I want you to know that it wasn't your fault. You were kind to me even when I started to lose my grip on reality. I know now that the voices in my head weren't real, that the conspiracies were just delusions. But by the time I realized this, it was too late. The paranoia had taken over. Please don't blame yourself. You were a good neighbor and a good friend. I'm sorry I couldn't be the same for you. Take care of yourself, Clara, and always keep an eye out for those who might be struggling in silence. Arthur Peterson. I read the letter over and over, the words blurring through the hot, endless stream of my tears. The crushing guilt I'd been carrying, a heavy burden, eased a little, a small measure of solace. But a new weight, a profound, unsettling one, settled in its place. How many others were out there, I wondered, like Mr. Peterson, fighting silent, agonizing battles we couldn't see, hidden behind polite smiles and closed doors. In the months that followed, I made a conscious, deliberate effort to truly connect with my neighbors, not just the polite waves and superficial small talk, but genuine, heartfelt conversations. I even organized a neighborhood watch program, not primarily to look for criminals, but to actively look out for each other, to be a vigilant, compassionate presence. Mr. Peterson's house stood empty for a long time, a silent, grim reminder, its windows like vacant eyes. Eventually, it was sold to a vibrant young family, their faces bright with excitement for their new home, their dreams. I watched them move in, and I felt a pang of sadness mixed with a fragile hope. As I went to introduce myself to my new neighbors, a silent promise formed in my heart addressed to Mr. Peterson. I would never again, if I could help it, let someone suffer in silence. His tragic end had opened my eyes profoundly to the hidden struggles people face, the silent torments they endure, and I was determined, with every fiber of my being, to make a difference, one neighbor at a time. The memory of that horrible day will stay with me forever. The pervasive smell, the frantic writing on the walls, the chilling sight of Mr. Peterson in that armchair. These things haunt my dreams. Yes, they replay in the darkness of my subconscious, but they also drive me, compel me, to be more aware, more compassionate, more deeply involved in my community. Because sometimes, the most terrifying things aren't the grotesque monsters under our beds, or the bumps and scrapes in the night. Sometimes, the real horror is the quiet, agonizing suffering of those around us, meticulously hidden behind closed doors and carefully constructed polite smiles. And the only way to truly fight that pervasive horror is with kindness, with profound attention, and with an unwavering willingness to reach out, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's scary. Mr. Peterson's story ended in tragedy, a profound sorrow, but it taught me a lesson I'll never, ever forget. We're all responsible for each other in ways both big and small. And sometimes a simple act of noticing, of truly caring, can make all the difference in the world.